I'd like to call the August the 17th, 2017 meeting of the Farragut Municipal Planning Commission to order, please. The first item is the citizens forum. This is when anybody who has a question or comment that's not associated with the agenda can get up and ask their question or make their comment. If anybody on the Planning Commission has a question or comment. I do have one thing to mention. The strategic plan. The town is updating their strategic plan, and they would like input from as many people as possible. There are going to be 2 community meetings. One is on Monday, the 28th of August at 3 o'clock here in the town hall. The other one is at 6 o'clock on Tuesday, the 29th here in the town hall. And we would like for as many people to come as possible. You can find out more about it on the town's website. The more input we have, the better off the town is. Anybody else have any questions or comments? Approval of the agenda.
I don't have any changes to the agenda, no.
Okay.
Move to approve, sorry.
Okay.
Oh,
Oh, you want to do that?
Who seconded that?
I
Are you
move,
going to recognize the Boy Scout first?
no, go ahead. We'll do this.
move to approve. Second.
Okay. Next, we have a Boy Scout with us tonight. We have a Boy Scout with us tonight. Well, one of you please come up and tell us what troop you're from and what badge you're working on. Oh. Okay. Just come up to the microphone over there, if you will, so you can be heard at home.
We still need to vote.
We didn't vote. On the agenda.
Hi, I'm Eric Poston. I'm one of the Assistant Scout Masters with Troop 444, and we're based out of First Farragut Presbyterian Church.
We are working on our communications merit badge right now. My name is Jonathan Poston.
Thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Okay, we'll go back to the approval of the agenda, and we have a first and a second. Do I have we got the motion?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll move on to vote. You're right.
Yeah.
All those in favor? All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay. Approval of the minutes for the July 20th meeting. Any changes to that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Election of officers. Let me, we do this on an annual basis or?
Yes, yeah,
Annual
per the
basis?
bylaws, we do this on an annual basis.
Basis.
And we have 3 officers, chairman, vice chairman, and secretary. We'll need a motion on each of the officers.
I move to approve Rita Holliday as the chairman.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. We'll move on to vice chair.
I move Ed to be vice chair again.
Ed Sinclair.
Ed Sinclair. I was gonna call
Second.
myself.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Motion to approve Ed Whiting as Secretary of the Planning Commission.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And we move on to the Planning Commission bylaws. We have a change, Mark.
The bylaws are also to be considered on an annual basis. They were reviewed last July, and we added actually the youth member, the non-voting youth member, to the bylaws. And the staff would request that language be revisited. We've had a youth member for actually a little over a year, so I guess technically he's, by the language of our bylaws, not supposed to be here. But Jack Coker's done a great job, and I think he's a tremendous asset to the community and the Planning Commission. And I think he's very interested in what we're doing. And I would recommend that we revisit Section 3 in the memberships to provide for the opportunity for that non-voting youth member to not be restricted to 1 year. Maybe it's something we could consider on an annual basis. And, you know, if no one else has applied and the youth member is still interested and you all are interested in keeping the youth member, that's something that we could, you know, allow that to continue. So if y'all are okay with that, I can make that amendment and bring it back to you next time.
So I think, you know, that.
Does that make sense?
Revisiting it on an annual basis and extending it if we need to, and depending on the number of applicants, I think that's totally reasonable.
Okay. Do I need to bring it back, or do you want me to just amend it per that language, just to allow for?
That's fine.
An
Mark, can I make a further, I'd like to make a further suggestion. If in the future we have multiple applicants, I think we need to consider a youth committee, planning youth committee. I would, if we have young people interested in planning, I think we need to really embrace that. It seems to me that a year is, you're just getting your feet underneath you. That's kind of how all of us on this board at one time had a year under our belts, and you just feel like you're starting to understand what's going on. If we have more interest in the community from the youth, I think that we need to be open, if that happens, to maybe considering a youth committee that maybe they could take turns up here or meet. It's something we should just be open to in the future.
Yeah, that's good. If I don't run them off, if they make it through a year, at least with me up here and the meetings that we have, I think that's pretty good. So I think that's a good idea.
But for the amendment for now, I think that's appropriate.
Okay. Does you all want to?
Do we need to vote on that?
Oh, okay, yeah.
What's the language you
I'm
want
not
to use?
sure what we say.
Do we even need to vote? I know.
Yeah.
We do need to vote on
that.
Oh, that is number 5, isn't it? Okay.
Sorry, we look at this language right here.
John Nels, 221 Smith Road. In fact, I think the things that I was going to talk about, Ms. Pomplin addressed, and that was, I kind of think that this is a great and it's a great thing. I'm all in favor of it. I think it's a great opportunity for young people that want to be involved in government to have the chance to do it. And when I first read the way it was written, it was kind of like this might inadvertently just keep one person in there forever. And I think you address that to, you know, if other people are interested, like an internship or something like that. But the other thing that really caught my eye, and I guess it hasn't been addressed and maybe does specifically, is there's no definition in the bylaws of what is a youth member. I think it might be a good idea to put some kind of age on it, like less than 21 or less than 25 and over 17 or whatever. But right now, there's not a definition of it, so it's a little bit confusing. So that was the only comments I had. Thanks.
And it's not just the planning commission that has youth members. It's all the town committees have the opportunity.
Not all of them, but a lot of them
A lot of
have the
them.
opportunity to do that, yes.
So
Motion and vote on this with
Louise, what
that-
do you mean by a committee?
Well, I'm just thinking for in the future. We don't have that issue right now, so I think we can address it if it comes to that. But I would hate if somebody else wanted to be a part of this. I certainly would hate to lose Jack, but
understand.
I would not want to exclude someone else who's demonstrating an interest. This can be. We all know we're kind of a little bit dorky here. We like to dig into things, and when you have a youth that's interested in
Speak
that.
for yourself, Louise.
I think she was looking at me.
So when you find someone who's interested in that, especially a young person, we need to be able to embrace that.
I think that we're, on this instance, where if you have multiple candidates, and you've got to consider multiple candidates, but at the same time, what it says is, if you just say it's not restricted to one term, then if it's restricted to one term, then that's Jack would go away even if there's no other applicants.
Right now, it says 1 year.
I understand that. I'm just, putting it out there for consideration,
Well, I'm just trying to
opening up that
come up with
discussion, but,
something that
so for now, all we
solve
need,
both problems.
do we just need to make a motion, move to approve, move to?
Probably need a nomination for Jack was my thought.
Okay.
And then I think in the absence of other applicants, I'll be happy to nominate Jack Coker for another year term. I would also like to take John's suggestion that we do further define it. I think an age would be appropriate, even though it may be defined somewhere else when we started the youth program a couple of years ago. But I think it might make sense for our bylaws as well to maybe add that in as a change. Also saying that we can renominate, so you're not term limited at 1 year, that it's something we'll revisit every year, and maybe just in our packets, if there's other applicants, the planning commissioners can review those applications, and then we can make a determination, a nomination at the next meeting.
I think in our advertisements, it's juniors and seniors that can apply to be the youth member of the various committees.
That's what I was remembering.
So you're saying the downside is Jack eventually will age out when he graduates?
Well, then the mayor can nominate him to be on the planning commission.
He can,
Be a voting citizen.
Okay, of course, he can't go to college, but, you know.
That might be difficult in
Yes.
college.
And I'll stay.
Thank you, Jack. So I think we've got a motion on the floor, Madam Chairman.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And now the approval of the bylaws. Do we need to,
I move that we approve the bylaws as amended.
Second.
all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, we move on to item number 6, discussion and public hearing on a preliminary plat for Chantilly Acres subdivision, parcel 18.01 and 18.02, tax map 162, 4.46 acres, 7 lots, zoned R-1, Randy Sparks, applicant.
This is a small development that's just north of the LCUB substation on McPhee Road. The property was actually rezoned back in 2016 from R1 to R2. Most of the property that surrounds it is already zoned R2. Then when the proposed lot layout was presented to the staff, we kind of went back and forth about whether it needed stormwater detention, and ultimately it was determined that we needed a small basin. This development also, in accordance with the subdivision regulations, has to have a 10% open space. So the lot 7, which has the detention, is also part of the open space. This preliminary plat would just provide for the grading necessary to build that basin, and also a walking trail, vehicular access to the open space area. That would have bollards at McPhee Road to keep regular vehicles from accessing that, but we did recommend that they make it a little wider than the normal 8-foot walking trail, and they've done that. It's a 10-foot trail, and it would serve, again, as access for maintenance of the basin, and also it terminates there to the east and would be tied into that property when that property develops as part of a larger walking trail system. So this is a pretty simple preliminary plat. The remaining staff comments are at your places. They're all very simple, and the staff recommends approval subject to those 4 remaining comments being addressed.
Is there anyone with the applicant who'd like to speak? Have a question or comment?
Mark, is this septic or is this sewer?
They are on individual septic systems, yes. Actually, this development, I was kind of surprised by that since McPhee Road was reconstructed a few years ago, but I don't think they brought sanitary sewer south of the high point. So it would be on individual systems.
Hi, I'm Rusty Baxa with Land Development Solutions, 310 Simmons Road, Suite K. We don't have any problem with any of the comments, suggestions from the staff, and so we're just, if you have any questions, we're happy to answer.
Questions?
Is the existing house going to stay?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
And you also took note of the other two things relative to the final plat?
Pardon me?
You took note of the other two items for the final
Yes,
plat?
correct.
Thank you.
Mark, do we have any issues with compatibility with the stormwater and the open space? Normally, stormwater facilities aren't counted towards open space, so do we feel like you need about .47? You feel like you've got that
Yeah.
in there?
That was something that was one of their comments, is just to verify that, that they are compliant with that. It's such a small, it's really kind of not even a detention, it's just a low area, really. I mean, we debated on whether they even needed it, given
Right.
the scale of what they're proposing. And they do have a walking trail, which is a functional open space element. So it's, yeah, that's.
What's the as platted lots? How many total lots are there now?
Well, there's really, I think there's just two. There's the one with the house and a lot that surrounds it, and then you have the lot one, where the house is being built.
There was a pre-existing
To the
lot, though,
north.
correct? So it's really 3 total lots, three going to 7. So it's not as typical as one lot going to 25. So I mean, I do
Right,
think it needs to
right.
be treated differently. It shouldn't be held quite to the same standard as a traditional subdivision. So I mean, I'm comfortable with that. I think the walking trail placement makes sense. Stormwater facilities, the open space, it's hard to, they're big lots anyway, so, it's not like he's trying to jam a bunch of little bitty lots in there. Matter of fact, all the lots, exceed the R2 minimums, and that's probably has to do with septic, trying to make sure they have enough room for septic. I
Yeah.
assume they've probably already done their soil testing and making sure they've got good perk for their septic, and through the health department, also have your reserve space. It's
Right.
kind of critical for septic. I think eventually you probably will get gravity sewer over there. You could probably do a low pressure sewer, but it'd be expensive, and for 7 lots, it probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense to low pressure all the way up to the hill, to the top of the hill.
Well, there's actually only 3 new lots.
Right, that's
Yeah,
correct.
yeah.
That's
So,
correct, yeah. You're right. You're going from really 3 to 6.
Yeah.
Buildable lots, the 7's really your detention lot. So I think it makes sense, and I think having the joint permanent access easements make a lot of sense, trying to reduce the curb cuts on McPhee Road. McPhee Road is a busy road, and it's just going to get busier as the Choteau Basin continues to develop. So I think it's a good use of the property, and it makes sense.
More questions or comments? Do I have a motion?
Move to approve with the subject twos.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Discussion and public hearing on a preliminary plat for Phase 3 of Bridgemore subdivision, 20.81 acres, 29 lots, Zone R-1 OSR, Fulham, McAdoe and Associates Incorporated, Placemakers Number 2 Partnership applicant.
Bridgemore, as you all know, is a large subdivision. It's being developed in phases. The initial phase was actually back in 2006. That was a very large phase. It had over 128 lots. And then in 2014, the second phase, which was in the north east corner of the part of the property that's on the west side of McPhee Road, was developed, and that was 40 lots. And now this particular phase, Phase 3, would be just to the west of Phase 2. It's a pretty small phase. It's only 29 lots and 21 acres. And so there's the lot layout that's shown on the screen. As you all know from our discussion back in July, when we reviewed a concept plan on the east side of McPhee Road, that was on land that was originally part of the entire Bridgemore development. The concept plan is going to have to be revisited, and that land taken away from the overall concept for the Bridgemore subdivision. They'll be presenting that next month in September for your consideration, and part of that they'll be looking at making sure that the property on the west side complies with all the OSR requirements, namely the 35% open space. They have that west of McPhee Road. and that the walking trail network within the overall development makes sense and is comprehensive and consistent with the original plan. This particular phase, like Phase 2, has sidewalks on both sides of the streets. One thing that the staff asked the applicant to consider, and they are doing that on these plans, and it's something that I'm just going to mention it to you all, is to increase the grass strip width from 3 to 6 feet on these new local streets. All they really have to do is 3 feet because that's our requirement, but what we found is having a wider grass strip provides more opportunities. It also gives a little bit better buffer between the vehicle and the pedestrian and softens the look of the street a little bit, and it gives you an opportunity to plant street trees in that space. So it's kind of, we found that the 3 foot is kind of a no man's land. It's hard to mow and it's hard to do much with it. It does give you a little bit of buffer, but I think in the future we might want to revisit that in our subdivision regulations to consider that on new local streets, provided for a wider, more functional grass strip. And they've been good enough to try that out here. Apparently that took a while to convey that, but we appreciate them working that into this particular plan. The remaining comments are at your places. There's really not any that, from the staff's perspective, couldn't be worked out. And we would recommend approval subject to those 9 comments being satisfactorily addressed. And if you have any questions, Billy Fulgham's here to probably answer those.
Hi, I'm Billy Fulgham with Fulgham McIndone Associates. I'm the civil engineer for the project. I think we're in agreement and have probably worked through most of these comments already that we've talked about. And there was only one that I had a question about, and I think I've got good direction from Mark on how to proceed forward. So I really don't have anything other to add or contest.
Is that the one about the depressions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Which number is it?
We think that those were man-made essentially, but we just need to have a professional that's familiar with that and an expert in that area to make that assessment based on their field review and the evidence provided by Billy. So,
Any other questions or comments? Anybody in the audience have a question? Have a motion?
Approval subject to the 9 stipulations.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I think I need to abstain. My property adjoins this property. Do I need to?
you don't need to abstain, but you can if you want to.
Okay.
But I wouldn't.
No, I'm fine. I'm fine. So we'll add one more to it.
Okay.
Thank you.
There wasn't anything part of that that affected your property.
Yeah. Okay, number 8, discussion and public hearing on request for a site plan amendment involving modification to building elevations associated with the Farragut Gateway project, former location of Silver Spoon at 103 South Campbell Station Road, 2.2 acres, Zone C-1, First Farragut Development LLC applicant.
Property is a former Silver Spoon, as noted there. The site plan was actually approved back in May of 2016, and the property owners since that time been trying to secure leases and get the numbers to work. As we talked about back in June, one of the issues that they were running into was trying to meet the then requirement in the mixed-use town center of all new buildings being at least 2-story or have the appearance of being 2-story. So the staff presented this issue to the commission at that meeting, and we talked about whether we might want to revisit some of that and provide a little more flexibility for smaller lots, because the issue they were having was they don't have enough physical space to provide the amount of parking that they would need for the uses they were marketing toward, to have a functional second floor. So we made some amendments to the mixed-use town center portion of the C1, and those have been approved now through the Board of Mayor and Aldermen. They allow for the opportunity to have a new building on a lot smaller than 3 acres, which this is, that would be less than 2 stories, provided they still meet the other building and architectural requirements of the mixed-use town center, like the 75% face brick on all elevations, and other elements of our design standards like the iconic element, and those different things. So there's 2 buildings with this project. This is building A. This will be the building that's up close to Kingston Pike. And then building B, this is the building that would be to the south of that, facing South Campbell Station Road. Very nice looking buildings. I think they've done a good job trying to, meet the requirements, the basic requirements of that mixed-use town center and what we're after. The only thing that we had at the staff level was just this north elevation. This would be the one that is the lower left. It's got kind of a lot of just brick, and it may need some more banding or something. I know there'll be a sign on part of that, and that would help break it up a little bit. But that's the only elevation that we saw that maybe there's a way to, without adding any additional cost, to break that up a little bit more. I think all the other elevations we were satisfied with. But so that's a summary of the project, and what they're requesting now is just approval for these revised building elevations. The site itself is not going to change except for some minor changes around the courtyard. But those will probably not be coming back to you because they're really just, from the staff's perspective, minor. So the site still has the bioswale and all that, but mainly just wanted your review of these revised building elevations. So I think the applicant's here if you have any questions about what they're presenting.
Mark?
Yes, sir.
On that north elevation, it's right up near that very steep drop-off, isn't it?
Yeah, there's.
So it's kind of obscures the fact that it's a big. I mean, it looks like a big flat, open elevation on the drawing there, but in reality, if you look at it, it wouldn't, because it's sitting down on a big.
It would be, yeah, it'd be well below the road. Yeah.
Does the applicant have any questions or comments, or anybody have any questions or comments from of the applicant?
Yeah.
Would this be addressed by the VRRB and landscaping? 'Cause that could be
They've
softened.
already approved the landscape plan when the site plan was approved back in 2016, and that's not really changing. Other than I think they're adding some more evergreens to meet that screening of the drive-through lane. You remember that was a requirement for the, if you're having a drive-through in the mixed-use town center, you have to basically screen it so you can't see it from any elevation. But other than that, they've already pretty much approved it.
So we're still gonna see the blank red wall?
Well, that's up to you all. I just point that out as really the only thing that we thought they might need to enhance a little bit, hopefully at no additional cost. But
What about just doing some false windows out of brick, maybe some roll lock, a soldier course, and maybe doing a herringbone, or I mean, I think there's some things that you could do. You've actually done it kind of on your corners where some of your lighting for your signage is.
Could you come
Paul,
up
you
to
might
the
want to come up to the
microphone,
microphone. But I mean, I think some false windows really shouldn't cost you any more with your brick mason. Just put a little bit of design and trying to keep a little bit of that historical flavor that we're trying to go after.
Hi, I'm Ellen DeVoe. I'm with Barbara McMurray Architects. To address what you were just speaking about, we have a row lock on the lower level, about 2'8" above the finished grade. Then we have a banding up 16 feet. You can barely see it if you could zoom in on that elevation. And then we also have 4 recessed herringbone patterns to reflect bricked up windows, basically.
So you're saying, you're talking about on the Building A north elevation, there is some herringbone?
Correct.
Okay, it's just not coming through on
It-
our
Yeah, maybe if
renderings.
it's zoomed in, it could be there, but
Okay. Would, you,
Oh, that works for me.
Yeah, I couldn't tell that
is there any way to
either,
draw
really.
that in to make sure whether we don't have any misunderstandings? Is there something that, you don't have it set up where she could put a pin on it and just, that way
Oh,
we're.
yeah, if you want to come over and draw on it.
Would you
I
mind,
guess.
that way you kind of give us a better idea? Because,
Yeah.
you guys are kind of setting the tone for development in this area, and we're just trying to make sure we understand what you're doing. I'm very much in favor of what you guys are doing, but I think there are some details that wouldn't cost you any money that you could put on this side of the building.
yeah, I've never done this before.
And it'd be a lot easier if you don't want windows. It'd be cheaper and easier than windows.
No, it's finicky.
So right there is one.
Okay.
You can see it if you look on the computer screen.
Well, I'm looking on the computer screen and I don't see it.
You see a little bit of the outline of where they.
faintly see it
I
on
can't
the
see an
screen.
outline. How many is there?
There's 4.
Got one
Four
on,
of it.
on
There's
the
4
west
total.
elevation too.
And you also have some up high in the parapet. Is that correct? And that's for the sign. Do you have signage? Because that faces Kingston Pike.
No, there's nothing on the higher part. We were trying to keep that a little bit more simplified because it wasn't looking.
False windows up there doesn't make sense if you're not putting signage up there.
Right, and we don't have them anywhere else.
Right, well, it looked just Disney World-ish, fake-ish.
Correct.
What? So all your signage actually going to face Campbell Station? Is that what you're thinking?
One is going to face Campbell Station, and then the other one is going to, here, I'll see if I can do it. One is going to be here.
Okay, and that's
then another
facing
one-
Campbell Station,
Correct, and then another one is going to be here,
This looks alike.
which is the exact opposite side.
which will face your parking lot. Makes that perfect sense. Okay. So you've got 4 kind of false windows. It looks like storefronts have been bricked in on that north elevation. Okay,
And it's got a herringbone pattern to differentiate.
great. I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't really tell on it.
I'm still struggling seeing it, but I maybe see a little outline, and
I see
now
the
we're on the
shadows,
record
yeah.
with it, so
Yeah.
we're good to go. Yeah, I might need those.
Any other questions or comments?
I have a comment, and I almost hate to bring it up because I think this is a.
Did you tell us before?
John Mills,
Tell us
221
again.
Sunford, sorry. And like I said, I hate to bring this up and sure don't want to because I'm all in favor of getting that piece done and in cost. But one thing I noticed in coming in, and I've been thinking about this, it's the flat roof. The other buildings around here have peaked roofs, and the new Dollar General has a peaked roof. And, you know, you were talking about setting the tone for what's coming down. I noticed that the credit union over here has kind of an interesting little thing. It has not only a flat roof, but it has some kind of peak in the middle of it, if you've ever noticed it.
We have, and John, it's a great observation. What we're trying to do is in areas that are more characteristically residential, like the Dollar General store, that's when we're trying to encourage those pitched roofs. In areas that we're trying to emulate what we hope someday will be a downtown Farragut, we're trying to go with more historical downtown style buildings that then have flat roofs. So, yes, I agree with you. The jewelry store across the street has a peaked roof, a pitched roof, but that's not exactly what we're going for. So we're really trying to set this tone here for more of a downtown style flavor. I know it's hard to look out a number of years and think that maybe Farragut will have a downtown, but this is really the start of it. So we're trying to create a little bit of that type of more urban architecture. I hope that answers your question, John.
Yeah, it does, and I'm absolutely in favor of getting that thing developed as soon as possible. I just wanted to bring it up.
So it will be a change, but someday some of those buildings will be renovated. The property becomes so valuable that somebody will want to go in and tear them all down and start over again, and then we can maybe hopefully bring them into compliance at that time.
Excellent, thanks.
It's always good to have a dream.
Do you have any other questions or comments?
Were there any subject twos?
Yeah.
No, that was the only thing, just to look at the building elevations. Like I say, the site plan, we'll look at that in-house and make sure the subject twos have been addressed.
And it's pretty much the same site plan you've had since last year, isn't it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you for coming in.
So when do we start digging a hole?
And a public hearing on a site plan revision for the overlook at Campbell Station Apartments, parcel 108 and 109, tax map 130, zone R-6, OSMFR, 820 North Campbell Station Road, 31.94 acres, GBS Engineering applicant.
Should have brought a sleeping bag roll for this one.
This particular project has got a long history, as you all know. We actually, back in 2014, it seems like forever, we revisited our multifamily zoning district, the R6, and as part of that, we actually created an open space version of what we've done with single family, like the OSR and OSMR, and that's the R6 OSMFR zoning district. And that district would allow you to build taller buildings and lessen the setbacks. It gives you some flexibility that you wouldn't have in the regular R6. But in exchange for that, the development had to leave at least 50% of the land in permanent protected open space. So this property north of the Holiday Inn Express was rezoned in 2014 to that zoning district. That's the only property in the town currently that is zoned this. And then since that time, they presented a number of site plans to you all. And they've been conditionally approved, but the conditions that weren't ever finalized, so the most recent plan was actually back in January of 2016, and that was approved with a number of conditions which haven't been addressed because the applicant has been trying to work with our building and fire code staff to work out something on the building construction types for this particular development. And I think they've kind of gotten to a point where that's hopefully worked out. It's been going on for a while. So now what they're doing is presenting the latest site plan for your consideration. It's very similar to the one that was conditionally approved in 2016, but it does have some new information you haven't seen, and that's really mainly why it's coming before you. One new item is a proposed water line, an 8-inch water line from the north that would come into the property. This is new because they needed to be able to provide the fire flow, enough water to fight fires, I suppose, on those buildings that are on the north side of the drainage area. That would be coming from an existing subdivision that's out of the town off of, I think, Black Road. Is that right? I met with First Utility District this afternoon because actually in looking back at the OSMFR language, you can't put a structure, even a utility, parallel within a buffer strip. There's a buffer strip along that property line because the property to the east is Knoxville Christian School and it's zoned R2. But what we talked about, I asked First Utility if there's flexibility in how you situate that line, and there is. And in fact, he said, I mean, if it works out as far as minimizing tree disturbance, that you could run it pretty much at a diagonal arrangement, and that would actually save the developer some cost on line installation, and it would bisect the buffer strip in a more or less angled perpendicular fashion, which we have allowed in the past and would be allowed in the OSMFR, and the rest of the buffer would be left in its natural condition, and that would come in kind of, almost like an angle to serve that northernmost building. So that would be something that, if you all support that line extension, now it is obviously in the open space, and we've continued with each site plan that we've seen to encroach into that open space, but they still meet the 50%. Yeah, that's one thing to consider. Another, I don't know if you want to talk about these individually before we go to the sanitary sewer, or I'm just trying to cover the new information. from that. But that's the first one. And then, let's see if I can get this to work right. The second item of new information is a sanitary sewer line. It's that green line there on the northeast part of the project. And that bisects, there's the buffer strip continues along that top of that page there. And there's actually an aquatic buffer through there as well. But this utility would bisect that obviously in a more or less perpendicular manner. What they would need to do there is demonstrate that within that buffer strip portion that they do bisect, that they're not removing any mature existing vegetation, because that's a requirement in the zoning district. It looks like they could do that, moving it around a little bit, because we're just talking about the buffer strip part of that. And then, let's see, the next thing to talk about with this is, and I think we talked about it in 2016, but I've slept a few nights since then, the iconic, whether this development, as you're driving along Campbell Station Road and you look over to the development, does it have that project identifiable iconic architectural feature that you identify with this particular development? They may have something else to look at, I think, on that for you all to consider. This was a rendering that was provided to the staff. That's the clubhouse. There's actually a building that's closer to Campbell Station Road. Their architect can talk to you about what they're proposing to consider as iconic and project identifiable. But that's another thing that we need to talk about. And then, of course, as you all know, the architectural design standards have changed in the last few months. This project was never actually approved because the conditions weren't met. And per our vested property rights and development standards ordinance, you have to meet all the conditions for it to be considered approved. So they do need to make sure that all the new buildings are at least 75% masonry. And they're actually their latest building elevation plans appear to show that they do comply. Now they may have some information or questions they have for you all on that, but they do appear to comply with the 75% masonry requirement based on their latest building elevation. So those are the new issues. The remaining subject twos, which some of those are in what I've already covered, are at your places. A lot of those are things that I think should be very easy. So a couple of them are just notes and standard comments. But those are really the major ones for you all to think about and talk about. And with that, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer those.
Does anybody have any questions of Mark? Or this Mark?
Comment, I have a question. Comment number one is, please provide a remote emergency access road. Are you even capable of doing that on this?
We're showing it as a reinforced soil area right there where just as you go past the storm pond, the first pond on the right, it's right there. What he wants is a detail of how it's going to be able to handle the 30,000 pound load. And I've already got that. I just didn't include it on the details yet, but it's going to be a reinforced earth woven basket put below the grass, so you won't see it, but it will be able to handle a 30,000 pound fire truck, because I've got another project right now that I'm doing where I'm going to do a driveway to handle that. And they're doing it in gravel. So my name is Mark Bollick. I'm with GBS Engineering, sorry, Ruth. And I'm at 1313 Calmia Road. And I'm not the only one that's going to be presenting stuff in front of you today. As you can see, we have a little crowd tonight, so I'll turn it over to them. We're here to answer any and all questions you have.
Good evening, I'm John Gumpert, 3924 Paces Ferry Road, Atlanta, Georgia. I'm here on behalf of the development.
I'd like to thank you guys for sticking it out over 3 years. I know it's been a tough process. I do think there is a need for high-quality multifamily in the town of Farragut. And we welcome you, and we're glad you're here, and we're glad you've been able to find some common ground with some of these issues that you've worked with over the past couple of years. And kind of look forward to trying to resolve some of these issues tonight. My thought is on the water line, if we'll just kind of tackle these one at a time, we kind of got three issues is if you want to boil all the fat off, we've got three issues: a water line, a sanitary sewer line, and may or may not have a brick issue. But my thought is a water line, if you could get creative, being that a water line doesn't necessarily have the design criteria that a sanitary sewer line does, maybe you could do a little jogging over there to move around some of the big kind of specimen type trees. Then you could then locate that water line with your surveyor and then determine the easement. It might be a pretty easy way to do it. I'd much rather you see you cross it diagonally and get creative with your design than go parallel with the buffer. I think it really sets a bad precedent. Even though those aren't houses next door to you with folks that have backyards that back up to you, the reality is they're residential zoning, and we want to treat everybody as fairly and evenly and put everybody on a level playing field. So my thought is if you could get creative with that, I know it's not as easy as drawing a straight line from point A to point B, but I think it might solve your problem. I'm not saying do a lot of jogging, because I know an 8-inch water line especially is an expensive water line. But I think you could put it through there, get it across that buffer, and then get it over to where it needs to service your buildings.
Yeah, we're happy to do that. I mean, I think that's a common sense way to fix that problem, and that's not a problem.
Anybody else have any more questions?
No, I just reinforce the comment and say that, I mean, it's a must to have that water line in there. I mean, it's a safety issue.
Yeah, we're enhancing the fire protection, and the other side of it is we still have, for this development, we have 50% undisturbed, and it's still 50% undisturbed. Having said that, jogging the line to avoid specimen trees will make it better for everybody. So I'm happy to do that.
Well, we appreciate your cooperation. Mark, I mean, I know that's a little ambiguity for the town staff to have to go out there and look at this proposed line, but it might be as simple as going out there and putting some flags in the ground and let the staff go, that's the best you can do. You're going to lose trees, especially with an 8-inch line, but it's better than putting sanitary sewer. You never know how deep it's got to be, so maybe your disturbed area is not going to be quite as big as it would be with the sanitary sewer. So, and again, if you start getting into, drip lines and major trees, you're probably going to lose those trees anyway. But my thought is let them do kind of the best you can and do a common sense approach. Now, if it ends up looking like this, that's not a common sense approach. I don't think we ought to make them zigzag.
I don't think FUD would allow that.
But I do think, I think there could be, and we've done this in the past with walking trails, trying to get town staff to coordinate with the developer and putting in walking trails in areas that make the most sense to try to save some specimen trees.
Yeah, that'd be good. We'll have a certified arborist on staff in about a week and a half, so that'd be helpful.
Even better.
Yeah.
Do you think that gives you enough clarity going forward, or do you think we need
Yeah, well, I mean, we can just, if it's acceptable with the applicant, we could, and First Utility, of course, ultimately they're going to have to be acceptable with it, but I'd be happy for them to flag it out and all of us take a look at it and try to minimize especially since it's in open space, obviously.
Right.
As you all know, I wasn't a fan of even crossing over into that area in the first place, but since we're there, let's try to figure out a way to protect the open space to the greatest extent possible and meet the requirements of the buffer strip, and I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay.
Now, if they do have to lose trees, is there some number that they'll have to put back?
Yeah, they'll need to account for that in the tree preservation removal plan. So, obviously, First Utility District's not going to be happy with you planting them back in the easement. That they'll have a 15-foot easement with this. Normally, it's probably just 10 for a water line, but this is a pretty big line, so it's going to be at least 15.
Troy might even tell you 20.
Yeah, it'll be at least 15 inches or 15 feet. So, yeah, that's fine.
We feel like we got a consensus on the Planning Commission. We want to talk about sanitary sewer now, if that pleases.
That sounds good.
Madam Chairman. The challenge with the sanitary sewer, which has been done in the past before, is dealing with the aquatic buffer. And obviously, we try to keep everybody out of the aquatic buffer, but sometimes sanitary sewer has to go where sanitary sewer is. You just don't have a lot of options, especially when you're trying to tie into an existing line. Is there an existing line over on the other side of that little drainage way? Is that what you're trying to tie into? A manhole over there?
We are being directed by First Utility to hit a specific manhole.
Okay.
And on the utility plan, we had to go out and have it shot, the rim and invert shot. And we have barely enough invert to get running minimum slope to get underneath the.
Like 1/8 inch, I take it? 8 1/4?
It's got to be an 8-inch sewer because it's main.
No, I would say 1/8 of an inch of fall. I'm just.
Well, no, we're looking at 0.5%.
Which
is the minimum you can do for an 8-inch line.
When you're in an aquatic buffer area, we don't quite give you the flexibility that we would give you like in the open space in the back,
Right.
as far as just put it wherever you want as long as you go around the trees,
Right.
And save what you can. Here, it's a little more critical to try to. So I guess based upon your tree survey, you've tried to snake it in there as.
Well, we also have to watch out for the proposed storm pond that's to the south of that too.
How deep do you think that line's going to be there?
Where it comes across the aquatic buffer.
Yeah.
At the minimum depth that I can make it at, it's going to have about a foot of cover underneath the intermittent stream.
Well, what's nice about that is it's going to keep your laybacks, your slope laybacks to a minimum, and so it's going to keep that area in there to minimum.
Right.
So you're going to put it down below the bed of? Is this a blue line or just a wet weather conveyance?
No, it's an intermittent stream. We have to get an ARAP permit to do this.
Okay. So but you're putting it under, not going to put it in in a sleeve.
It's not. Yeah, it's going to be encased in concrete.
Okay.
But then once we go up the hill, we're having to go around one retaining wall and under another retaining wall to get up to the road that the main trunk system's going to be on.
Do all the buildings ultimately drain to this spot right here?
Everything south of the draw.
Everything south of the draw.
Yes.
So on the north of the draw, we
have that already routed. It goes to a manhole that's on our property.
It's already on the property now.
Yeah,
so you have
the sewer line goes up and comes across to the trailer. That's the sewer trunk also feeds the trailer park.
And obviously you have a topography issue trying to get to that manhole.
Well, the problem is when our original plan, we came in and tried to tie it in underneath our proposed culvert. To do that, we were running with depths of sewers of 28 feet. 38 feet. And First Utility said,
No, nobody wants to service a line 30 feet.
Yeah, so they came back and said, go this way. And in fact, they're actually making us also, on the units that are running parallel with the apartment complex, all the basement units are going to be gravitated over to a lift station and pumped up into the sewer system that'll be in the parking lot, which is where they're asking us to put it. It's not where I wanted to put it, but that's where they want it to put. And those will be, the lift station and the force main will be theirs once we get done. The gravity sewer for that. All the rest of the 3 stores above will go towards the parking lot. We're having to do a split sewer system for those 4-3 split buildings there, which is, that's going to add cost to us. Sure. That's what First Utility is requiring us to do, so we have to do it.
Well, when you have East Tennessee topography, and
Yep.
and you got to run downhill. Sometimes you got to pressurize, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yep.
Does anybody else have any questions or comments with the sewer line?
We'll have to mark that one too. Like I say, the buffer on the very top there, they'll have to make sure they don't disturb any existing mature trees there. The buffer strip, the 35-foot buffer strip, which it looks like based on this, they could get it in there without doing that. So
especially if it's that shallow. How big a line is that going to be?
8-inch line.
Okay.
Root pruning on both sides and
It's going to
probably
be
get
an
it
8-inch
in there.
line, and we have to hit a manhole in space. So it's not like we have a lot of opportunities to wig and waggle.
Any more questions and comments?
And then the iconic question is the next one.
Pat, I'll let you talk to that.
My name is Pat Iannelli. I'm the architect with PDI Architecture, 1020 Brazil Road, Pendleton, South Carolina. So originally, back in January of 2016, what you're seeing is what we were proposing as iconic elements for the development or for the building. I think there is some clarification that it was more of a development iconic type feature, which was wanted and to be seen from Campbell Station Road. So we have been going back and forth, and we have come up with some schemes which Mark has not had a chance to see. The first building, the closest to Campbell Station Road, and I don't know if you can, Mark, can you change it back to, we have a site plan.
Yeah, let me see what. Trying to think of which slide would be the best here to. Well, I'll just show an overall site plan. I think this might show it. No, it's the wrong one. Well, I can point it out here where it's the building you're talking about.
Building number one
Here's Campbell
is the
Station
L-shaped.
Road, and then the building, the first building's right there.
Right. So that is going to be the primary facade that you see as you drive up Campbell Station Road. And on the southeast side of that, which would be viewed, we are proposing to do some tower elements similar to what we were doing on the buildings, only more substantial. What you see at the bottom is the facade that you would be seeing, and this board is enlargements of those iconic towers. What we're presenting is iconic towers. So that element will set the stage for the project and be what's viewed and identified with the project, which I think is what the desire was with the development standard.
I like the towers. And are those windows going to be active in those top floor units?
Yes. So that corner.
Yeah, I think that would be a real desirable unit to have that with that, super. I mean, probably 15-foot ceilings in there.
Yeah. So the top floor is going to be a prime unit. The lower floors, there's going to be larger, more deluxe type units as well. So trying to work that into the pro forma for the project, I think it could provide some appeal for another type of tenant, as well as provide the identity for the project.
What size units are you proposing to be having there as far as?
I do not recall offhand. I've been so concentrated on the buildings and the site planning. The units we designed 2 years ago, so I don't know what that is. You know what that is offhand?
Mark, he's slept a few nights between now and then.
About, if you didn't hear, so I think the average is somewhere around 1,065 square feet or so.
Is that 2 or 3 bedroom?
That's the average for all the
okay.
per
You're right.
unit.
That's an average.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that would be somewhere around probably a little less than a 2-bedroom.
Would building 1 probably be the only one with the
Yes.
extra tall towers? Okay.
Yes.
Because that's kind of what we see from Campbell Station. That was justification on there.
Yes.
You may realize that you get such a rent premium on those. It might be. I think when you get a lot of wow factor when your property manager goes over there and shows that to a prospective tenant.
And the rendering that Mark had pulled up was actually a view from close to that balcony, looking over the clubhouse, the pool area, and everything, looking back to the north. So, I think there is some reasoning for prime units in that corner as
Mark,
well.
can you put your pin on the clubhouse? Where is the clubhouse?
Yeah.
Right in the center,
see.
isn't it?
It is.
What the little kidney shape, is that a pool?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a kidney shaped pool. Okay, I'm trying to. Okay, that's where the clubhouse. All right, that makes sense.
Anyone else have any questions or comments?
Yes, gentlemen, you may want to put those in the back so people can look at the renderings. Sounds good.
Okay. Yes.
Where do you guys? I think the elephant in the room probably has to do with your brick coverage. If there's no reason to beat a dead horse, if you think you're already there.
Well, we don't think we're already there. Let me just say that the development was originally clad in about, with the understanding that we do 60% brick. We actually took it to about 70%, and we're covered with that.
Okay.
The 75%, we think is a detriment to the project. We think it is tougher to make the project look modern with that much brick on it. We end up having to, put brick on some of the 4-story element, some of the 3-story element, where we prefer to do the cementitious siding because it breaks up the facades. So, generally it's a cost issue. In this instance, it's not a cost issue, it's an aesthetic issue where we want to be able to compete with the modern apartments that are being built. We feel like we can better do that with the flexibility to go somewhere between 60 and 70% brick. And that really has to do with the architects. But what we've done is we've gone to the nicest apartment communities in the area, and we're trying to come in above them. So we're trying to compete in every way that we can to surpass that, both in interior finishes and in exterior finishes. So we would like relief, and we would like to be able to stick with our original design, which was roughly 70% brick.
Well, we've got to be careful about talking about original design because we need to be talking about this design.
The January 2016 submittal, which, by the way, that elevation is showing except for the towers.
Except for the towers. Okay. What the I know we have the Tennessee Code annotated, and Mr. Seymour's here and can probably tell us a lot more about that than maybe we necessarily want to hear. But I might save you a little bit of time. Irrespective of the vested property rights, I really feel like that as much as I'd like to see 75% brick on it, the reality is when you guys formally started this process, we had a set of rules. And it's taken a long time to get here, but I don't think it's fair to you to say, all right, guys, by the way, we've changed the rules during your course of submittals and going back and forth, and now you got to do this. And again, I'm a huge brick advocate. I mean, this goes back to 2012. I was the one that I said brick, brick, brick. We gave a little bit of flexibility with other masonry materials, and I think you've done a good job. I think if you try to find another 5% on there just to slap it somewhere, it's going to look funny if you're not changing and doing your transitions, like for instance at your water tables between one floor to the next floor. I think it's going to look funny just to stick brick up another, you could do it and say, well, we're going to put another 2 or 3 feet all the way around the building, but your scales are going to look off, and I think you are going to have an aesthetic issue. And I for one, I support what you guys are doing. I'm just one person on the planning commission, and I do very much respect what Mark is saying. The rules have changed. Obviously, we'd like to hold you to the new rules, but the reality is for this particular project, and being that you've been in the hopper for about 3 years now working on this project, and I'd really like to see this project get going. And based upon the fact that holding you to a higher standard that is in place today that wasn't in place when you were started, I would support a variance based upon the 75% brick.
Okay.
I have a question more for the board. Have we backed ourselves in an effort because we didn't like how one building was designed? Did we end up putting in a brick requirement that we're ending up shooting ourselves in the foot because we didn't want to see that building again, and then spreading it out to other? We tried to fix a problem and we went.
No, I don't think we did. I'm really comfortable with the 75%. I do think there should be flexibilities under certain scenarios. I think when we are thinking brick and architectural design standards, I say we, I'm going to talk about NOAA. When NOAA thinks about brick and architectural design standards, I'm primarily thinking about commercial, retail, and office. When we think about and that's going all the way back to 2012. That's really what I was focused on. Now, we encompass multifamily in that, because multifamily, they're big projects, they're typically visible projects, they're on main arterials, and so I think that, but primarily what I was thinking was, but I don't think I ever necessarily contemplated a 4-story building and trying to force a 4-story building to be 75%. And so I think that under this scenario, based upon your submittal being 3 years ago, and even if it was 6 months ago or 12 months ago, the reality is you guys have made decisions, major financial decisions, based upon a set of rules that we've had on the books and available online in the municipal code. And I don't think it is right for us to pull the rug out from under you and say, hey, we're going to change it. Now, I'm not saying Mark has a set of directives, and his job is to follow the rules. And when things are open up for interpretation, that's why we have a planning commission to determine, all right, this was our intent and these are the things. And then we also think about slippery slopes and precedents and so forth. I'm not concerned about a precedent here because the reality is you guys submitted a long time ago. And I don't have any desire to change the rules. And I think we've got a good-looking set of buildings. I cannot tell you how many times we've forced you guys to change your architecture. A bunch of times, and I'm sure you know exactly because you've been writing the checks for how much it cost. But my thought is I think we're there. I think you guys have made a really good attempt at the iconic elements. And again, when we started thinking iconic elements, again, we were mostly thinking on smaller buildings, strip centers, office buildings, single-tenant buildings, the buildings like we looked at tonight in the MUTC. And I think this is a real good way to put some good timeless architecture in the town of Farragut that doesn't look quite as big as it is. I mean, 4 stories is a lot, and I think you've done a really good job of breaking it up because you could have come in with I'll tell you, maybe not here, but you could have gone into Knox County and said, hey, we're just going to do a big 4-story building, and we're going to do the whole thing in vinyl siding, and that's what you're going to get. And that was one of the reasons why we adopted the architectural design standard. So I really think you guys have gone above and beyond trying to create something that hopefully you're going to be proud of, that's going to pay dividends to you because you're probably going to collect hopefully the highest rents in multifamily anywhere in East Tennessee. And we're going to be proud of as a community to have something that looks good because there's some folks that aren't real big fans of apartments and multifamily. Personally, I am. I think there's a need for it. I'd like for my kids when they graduate someday to be able to come back to the town and afford to live in the town. And I think you guys are there.
Location,
That's right.
I appreciate what you've done, and I agree. It's, that's enough said.
I absolutely agree. I'm looking back to what we approved previously, but the reality is there's a break point, natural break point. And I mean, to the absurd, if you went 100% brick, it'd look like an institution.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's not what we want to drive for. So that, 70 or 75%, what you've done is totally adequate to me.
Well, we'll have to think about that if that planned commercial development comes into play on South Watt Road. That's a requirement, 75% masonry. Now, it could be a mixture of brick and stone.
Right.
Doesn't have to be brick.
But, I mean, that's something y'all need to think about.
So they're not doing 4 I think theirs are 2-3 splits, aren't they?
We've got
3-4.
Oh, they're a 3-4.
Aren't they 3-4?
I thought we could only do 3-4s
Yeah,
in this open space R6. But you're saying because the PCD district allows some extra flexibility.
Right.
So we do need to look at that.
Yep.
We do need to look at that. Again, I think what these guys can hang their hat on is that they have been submitted with a site plan, even though it wasn't a completely approved site plan, because we were still working out some kinks with utilities and construction design and some other things. But I do think that's ultimately what you guys can hang your hat on is, hey, we've been in the queue, we've submitted to the town, and just because we changed the rules doesn't mean that we have to force you guys to hold your feet to the fire on the new rule. Great.
Mark,
Comment number 10 there, I suppose, because that's talking about adherence to the current requirements of the ADS.
Let's come back for 1
Correct.
second on this thing. Do we need to put a variance in this approval right now?
I don't think it needs a variance,
Okay.
being that they're grandfathered in. Arthur Seymour, you're an attorney, and you're probably on the clock right now. We might as well get some legal advice out of you.
Actually, I think you do need to do that because you're really not grandfathered.
Go ahead and spell it out.
When we passed the vested property rights and development standard ordinance, we were very clear that in order for something to be approved, you had to meet all the subject tos. They haven't done that, so this has not been approved.
Your subject to because they were still have these utility items outstanding.
They had a number of subject tos that were still out there, so it's not been approved by our ordinance. So we have to follow our own ordinance. I think if you're going to vary from what we have now, because that's what they're supposed to follow, you need to justify that with an actual variance action.
Well, and then I think we also should include the hardship in there, and I think the legitimate hardship is that these folks have been in the queue for a number of years. And I think that needs to be in the motion.
And that could be an argument for that, absolutely.
Right.
But I think you do need just to be clean about it, address why you have varied from something that hasn't really been approved.
It needs
So
to
you
be formally codified.
So we need to pass a variance first?
Yes.
So we need that as a separate action item, is that what you're saying, Madam Chairman?
think so.
Okay.
Yep.
Do that one first.
Let me try
So
to
that will
craft this.
protect us with anything else.
Well,
that
the
comes.
ADS is not real clear on variances, but I think just to be clear from a record of the action taken, it's cleaner to do it that way. So there's a record on that specific item and why they weren't held to the current architectural design standards. That you all have your reasons for that, and they're in the record.
And then you'll feel comfortable with it. I'm
Well, I
not
would
sure I
be-
feel comfortable with it.
Yeah, I'd be more comfortable with it because it's, you're varying from a requirement.
Okay. Well, I'm going to try to make a stab at this particular variance.
Do we have any
Yeah.
other questions on any other of the subject to? There's several subject twos here. Are you all okay with all of these?
We are.
Mark, are you okay?
Yeah, I think we can work out the remaining ones.
Madam Chairman, I'm going to make an attempt at this. I'd like to make a motion for approval of a variance to meet the current architectural design standard requirements. I'm going to be very specific with this because it's not just a blanket variance for all the other requirements, but to reduce the brick coverage or masonry veneer coverage from 75 to 70% based upon the applicant's original submittal date and also the scale and proportion of the four-story building.
Second.
If I may, it was a little over 60. I'm Arthur Seymour.
Oh, I thought we were at 7. I thought you guys were up to 70 now.
In many cases we are, but 60 was the guideline.
Yeah.
So what I don't want to see is if you come back with something else that's going to be less brick than what I'm looking at.
No, that's not the intent.
Okay. So
No,
what
no,
you're
it's,
saying.
you all approved in January of 16, and that's what.
So what you're saying is even though you think you're around 70, there you may have some buildings that are closer to 60?
Yes.
Okay, so what you're worried about is having some catch-all and you realize you submit a set of plans and, and getting denied.
Well, and then the last building elevations that was submitted to the staff appeared to, based on the percentages that were listed, appeared to actually comply with their 75%, unless I was looking at it wrong.
Well, you may have some buildings that have a little
Well,
more
I
brick on
think-
them than others.
There was some confusion at the time, and yes, we had increase, and that's where we just.
That you requested it, I think, Mark.
Are you going to build that, the latest
No, the
submittal of
existing-
building
Well,
elevations?
I think what they're intending to build is what was approved in January of 16.
But that doesn't include the iconic elements.
Well, with that, yeah, obviously.
Well, I'm going to be uncomfortable with that motion without seeing those renderings again because I've slept since January of 16. Okay. I mean, I think we're going to need to get, I'd like everybody to be able to see these renderings and just make sure we're all reading off the same page.
Yeah, I agree.
Because
Yeah,
I do
that's-
think there were
that's
some
nice.
things that I can't remember again exactly what we discussed in January of 16, but I do remember that we did spend some time on the elevations and renderings. Yeah.
I don't know the procedure, can I just pass it
Yeah,
down?
just pass it to me. We're pretty informal. Okay, so this is actually what you're proposing. What I'm holding in my hand, is that correct? Okay. And then how does
That was what was.
That was-
back in 16? Okay.
16 without.
And then all right, so are we, obviously we've got building 1 here, which has the extra tall iconic elements here. But the majority of your buildings are similar but don't have the extra tall tower elements.
The lower percentage kind of associated where you have a 3-story. So obviously you got maybe 2 in brick and 1, and then, so you get less, whereas the ones with 4, you've obviously got.
Well, yeah, it makes sense when I'm looking 2/3 versus 3/4.
Absolutely.
That's where this 66% up to 75% is.
So you have the same,
Like the clubhouses,
you have the same
close to
break
98%.
issue, and that's.
Mark, we're going to need to make sure you're comfortable. Now, we're not looking at construction drawings here, but we are looking at renderings.
Yeah.
I feel like what I don't want to do is I don't want to delay these gentlemen, but I also don't want to pull
Facing the audience.
I don't want to sabotage the staff either, and here we are approving something that you may have not looked at in a long
Yeah.
period of time.
Right, yeah. Well, it's going to change a little if they're incorporating those iconic, what they
Well,
say
now,
are iconic
for
elements.
for interest of full transparency, the iconic elements are really on the first building that is the one closest to Campbell Station Road.
Is that
Which
the only
building?
one? They're not on all the buildings?
The iconic, no, it's not on here. The iconic one.
It's everything but that.
You're a gated facility, correct? You're a gated facility. So I'm most concerned about what the general public's going to see as they drive by. You guys should be concerned about what your residents see and their guests.
Well, let me ask you, have you considered, I know that you got the concern about the too much brick. What about mixing stone and brick? If it's not a cost issue, then that would meet the requirement. Just throwing it out there. It's still masonry.
Right.
But it does break it up. Because I do agree, too much of any material, like we talked about with the Farragut Gateway project, you know, without some kind of architectural enhancement or a change of materials can you really detract from what you're trying to do. So I don't know if you've thought about that, because then that would be compliant, and you could just, you know, add some of that and, you know.
Our preference is to use a cementitious siding because you can paint it different colors and you can create different facades with that. The stone that folks use, we're not big fans of because it's stuff that you stick onto the buildings, whereas brick is attached to the building with mortar and brick ties, so it's more substantial. The stone is something you attach to a stucco type product, and so we don't feel like that's as great a quality. But the bigger issue from our perspective is that the various types of siding, cementitious siding, which is typically board and batten and things like that, can be painted different colors, and we can just derive interest in the building. And as you say, if we went 100% masonry, it looks institutional. So if you look at the really high-end apartment projects in the region, they have at least a 20 to 25% siding element to them, and it's so that they can break it up. So that's our desire. And that was Pat's original design. And I don't know the exact brick, you know, coverage, but it was designed with that in mind. And in fact, I developed a project in Knoxville on the river where we probably have less brick than what we're proposing here, but you can also see the siding and the various colors that we used and how that enhanced that product. And that, you know, that product has been, you know, we're 100% occupied on that project, and it's just been a wonderful project. And I credit a bunch of that to Pat's mixture on the exteriors. I mean, we spent a lot of time without really a end goal in mind, if you will, on the percentage of brick. But, you know, we might have 50% brick and 50% siding, but it was more to get the facade look that we wanted, not for any other consideration, really.
Using your words, 20 to 25% siding and a little bit of elementary math, we're getting back to that 75%. What?
Well, my math may be wrong. It may, and again, we didn't do it to try to hit a percentage. We hit it to try to hit a look.
Okay.
And that's what I'm struggling with. Is I want to hit the look of the project because I've got to compete with other folks that are doing that now. I think by going 60% and higher on brick, I'm going to be more substantially bricked than most product, but I don't want to limit it. I think I get some flexibility with the siding, and I think I have a way of creating a better product.
Well, I'm seeing some things on this handout here that's saying building A, building B, building C, and the other rendering said building 1. I assume building A is the same as building 1, and we've just had a little nomenclature change. And then this particular building A, you're proposing it be the same except with the taller tower elements.
Just on the Campbell Station Road side.
Okay, well, I don't have a north, south, east, west, but I'm assuming.
It's a 4-story view.
Okay. So you're saying it's a 3-dimensional rendering that I'm looking
sorry.
for in here?
It is, I apologize. I had one color rendering for for each of the buildings.
Okay.
I do have the black and whites if you'd like to see those.
Well, we kind of like color for the,
Colors.
I'm not going to beat you up on colors. Colors actually are important to our architectural design standards. I think all your colors comply. Basically, we do have a color palette and earth tone colors, so I think we're good on colors. So but I do think for the record, we do need to have some color renderings. And sometimes we actually even get into some samples. I'm not sure, this is not normal. I mean, sometimes we have folks bring in some samples.
Yeah.
Let's try to take care of these other issues first. What I'd really like to do is the large rendering that was here of the building that's closest to Campbell Station. I'd like to see that particular building rendering kind of entered into the record for your iconic element. And I'm not sure how when you do this, I just don't want to have a whole lot of exhibits entered into the record that don't make a whole lot of sense to the staff when the staff is trying to ultimately permit your construction documents on this. Mark, I'm trying to cover you here with building codes and officials and so forth, and if I'm getting off base, let me know.
Well, if you don't have what you need to make a good decision on this aspect of their project, I think that's something that you could revisit, but maybe not hold them up on other things so that we've got a clean review of exactly what they're doing. To me, would be more, because they're kind of throwing stuff out here that is not all comprehensively
Well, we need our building
conveyed and-
nomenclature. We'd like to get that consistent. What would you guys think about turning you loose on the site plan? And then we're going to need some new renderings. Obviously, you're probably going to want to have some sort of consensus of how hot we're going to hold your feet to the fire, whether it's 60% or 70% or 75%. And Mr. Seymour also may want to weigh into our decisions, but what are your thoughts if we got you that tonight on your site plan? Because it's a great time of year to get in there and get started before winter sets in.
I think that would be fine. I think one of the things we'd like to do is just simply say the brick coverage that we originally proposed, we would like to, have approval of that, and we can provide those, colored elevations with the exception that the iconic structures that we're now proposing, which we weren't proposing then, be added into the elevations as well, so that you have a comprehensive look as to what we're doing.
I'm probably not there tonight on that without having, because we're kind of piecemealing, we're taking one document and what the tower element's going to look like this, and it's actually building one, not building A, and so I'm probably not there to get you approval on the architecture. But I think there's some other opinions on the planning commission, and I've done a lot of talking, and I may just shut up and let some other folks speak. And there may be some folks in the audience that would like to talk.
Thank you.
You're most welcome.
I have two questions. First of all, I want to know a precise percentage before I approve anything.
Right. Yep.
And also, type D, is this just a printing error? It looks like it's a black building.
Probably just a color copy. Yeah.
It's a longer building, so the scale's a little smaller.
Okay, but it will be brick here.
Do you have the percentage of brick?
I do. I have the drawings that were submitted and agreed to back in January 2016, if you would like. It shows percentages on it.
While he's grabbing those drawings, are there anybody in the audience that has some thoughts or comments about what ultimately we're trying to achieve for the community tonight?
Yes, sir. Number one.
Would you mind come up? We'd love to have you come up to the microphone and state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Kelly Clancy. I don't know these gentlemen, but I understand they're trying to go ahead and develop something in our community.
Can you also give us your address?
Yes, 376 Dominion Circle. I think there's three items that they were trying to address. Number one, the sewer issue, the water line issue. If you could move forward on those two items, and then attend to the other, the elevations and the brick or masonry siding. I think if you could move forward on that issue, that'd be very helpful for them. Again, I don't know these people from Adam's House Cat. But I think if they could move forward on that, that'd give them more confidence to move forward for Farragut. Thank you.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
One of the challenges that we face is that to start the project, we've really got to have the full project defined. Our lenders, are not going to give us a phased start. And we are certainly desiring getting going while we've got reasonable weather to get the site work started. So that is, a component to what we're doing. Again, on the brick coverage, all that I'm really seeking is that we stick with our original submittal with the iconic elements on the first building, added in. So that simply is what I'm trying to get.
Perhaps
Original
if we
submittal
could
was the
have
60%.
one clarification. The percentages apparently varied from building to building as originally approved. And Pat, you have those figures.
I do not, I have them here. I could go through each one if you would like, but they average, like the clubhouse is probably 95, 96.
A range of kind of where you think your low and your average and your high. I know it's hard. You'd have to get a calculator out, but just to do the best you can. And
I would probably across the whole project, I would assume it'd be a 65 to 70%. Side elevations, are a little easier. You don't have balconies to contend with and windows to contend with. So if you look at each facade, I haven't run the numbers, but I would look at about 65 to 70%.
you get credit on your windows. Your overall surface area coverage, you can exclude your glass, and that actually makes your percentages go up a little bit. So when you're calculating that, it actually helps you.
Right.
So that way you're not penalized for. We don't want you to have dark apartments with no windows.
So, if you would like, I could pass out.
Well,
Wait a minute, let's let Mark has a comment.
in the interest of kind of common sense at this point, I think we need a complete revised building elevations of exactly what they're wanting to do with the iconic elements, with percentages clearly defined and materials, and you all reconsider that in September, that aspect of the plan, and I'm fine with working with them on getting started on the other things if the commission is in agreement with that. I just think there's too many unknowns right now because you're kind of taking plans that were conditionally approved several months ago, and you're trying to impose new elements on those, and that always creates problems when you don't have a clear set of drawings that everybody understands and is in agreement with. That's what needs to happen, in my opinion.
I don't disagree, but I would make the observation that from these renderings and then looking at the iconic element, I don't see any reason. I'm not hung up on whether it's 68% or 7 or whatever. I'm looking at what is covered and what's the transition zone in this set here. And I know what I've seen with the iconic. I think bringing all the elements together is good for the record. And what we would have is some variance we can talk about. We don't have to talk about percentages of the variance. We can talk about the acceptance of the variance of what we're accepting from the previous submittal and move forward on that. So from a cleanup standpoint, fine, but personally, I'm satisfied with the coverage I see.
Well, I think the more brick, the better. I think it's a classic look. I think it shows a permanency. We talked about that with developments before. But I want to see what I'm voting on.
Yeah, I think bringing it together in one package is still good. But
I think we've got to have exhibits that are entered into the record that don't have a piece from here and a piece from here. It needs to be cohesive and it needs to tie back into the site plan. Probably not what you guys want here, but we've got, this body has to be able to arm the staff with the right information when you guys submit your construction documents. Otherwise, you're going to get held up there, and you're going to come back to this body. Because if there's a gray area with staff, they're going to say, well, you got to go back to planning commission because that's not exactly what I remember. And I just don't think we have enough data tonight Even though I think there's kind of a general understanding, the problem is it needs to be in the record. It needs to be black and white and not open to interpretation.
We also, where you're focusing on your development, we have to consider anything that's going to come along in the town of Farragut. And unless we know what we're approving, I'm not comfortable with that.
But I don't think we have one that goes back 3 years, 2 years.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
I'm looking forward to it coming to completion, but we gotta stay out of trouble.
It makes sense.
Hey.
I think the key is to get an understanding from y'all, it sounds like.
Yeah, he'll have to.
You're in the right direction. We just need to kind of wrap it up and present the final, get it cleaned up. Makes sense.
And Mark, you will get with them to get going on what can be done.
Yeah, really the only thing that would be left, and I guess Noah would need to do something with this motion, whatever you want to do with that, but is that the actual building facades are going to have to be looked at again by you all just to make sure everybody's on the same page and they're presenting exactly what they're proposing to build. And then that could be reviewed by you all in September, but it wouldn't hold up the rest of their project, assuming they address the subject twos related to those other items that don't relate to the building elevations.
Can I ask?
And you have said you're okay with all these other subject twos.
Well, let me ask a simple question, if I'm understanding this correctly. So basically, you're saying we'll table the iconic issue, the brick, and all, everything to do with the buildings itself.
It's not the placement. We're good with your placement of the buildings.
Okay.
We're talking about architectural design.
But we can get permission so that we can get, because we already have a notice of commencement from the TDEC. We want to be putting the erosion control fence up. We want to start moving dirt, because it's going to take 3 to 4 months to get the dirt moved. The buildings, I mean, the buildings could be, this issue with the buildings is not going to, we need to be moving dirt right now, because October's the driest month, as we all know, historically. Of course, this year's going to be shot, because we've been getting rain every third day. But I want to make sure that you all are comfortable we'll meet all the other subject twos that are on that list in regards to adding notes, taking care of the fire issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In changing the water line and working with staff to make the routing, and the same with the sewer, to the best of our ability. But we need to be moving forward so we can get moving dirt. That's what we really want to be doing.
I'm comfortable with that. But keep in mind, you got a lot of things that you've got to still do. We would just make you eligible to receive a grading permit, but you still got a lot of punch list of all the other things you got to do. But the good news is, instead of losing 30 days, you're going to be able to start working on your punch list items, and like your silt fence, and you might even be eligible by the time you get your bonds posted and all the other things that you got to do. And you might be eligible to start, clearing and doing the work that you need to do. I'm comfortable with that.
That's what we would like permission to do, is get to the point where, yeah, I understand your concern about not voting on the architectural issues, because we don't have, quote unquote, a full package here that you can bless wholeheartedly. I understand that, but we want to be moving dirt. So if you could approve, subject to everything but the architectural issues.
Well, you're still a subject to the architectural issues.
Well, no, I'm not.
I know what I'm just trying to figure out how to craft a motion, assuming the rest of this body's comfortable with that. Staff, do you have any objections to the direction we're going?
Yeah, I mean, you could just, I guess, make a motion on the site-related items, and that the building elevations will be revisited. They're not part of this particular action, but they'll be revisited.
And that's what we're asking for.
They still have to address all the other items before they can get a grading.
Well, that's why I don't want to accidentally go on the record and throw something out that I didn't mean to throw something.
But that's not really where you have so much brick on a building is really not going to affect your initial grading, getting started, if they can meet the other conditions.
And I think we can.
I think we're real close. I mean, I know you guys got to fund this, and you got to get your financing and do all that. I know these things, are a little bit to a degree change, but I think we're real close to where you guys ultimately want to end up. And if you want to get some approval tonight, I think that's probably the only way that this body, well, it appears that the consensus of this body is going to be comfortable giving you approval for your site, and not necessarily approval for your renderings. So we'll just need to see your renderings, your elevations, and let's just look at one building at a time and look at your percentages based upon those. Because you have multiple buildings. You got the clubhouse, and building A has a little more oomph to it than the building B, and that's okay. But I'm saying we've got to be able to enter those into the record.
Okay, so we'll come back with those percentages, and it won't be different than what we've already shown, other than the iconic
You can submit anything you want to submit. I don't know necessarily what's going to get approved in September. I'm thinking we're there.
Right.
But I'm one of 9. So, but yes, I think generally that's where the consensus is to get exactly what you want to build with the iconic elements, with the nomenclature corrected to appear on your site plan and on your elevations, and I think we're going to get there next month.
Because to be clear, we can't close our project until we have a building permit. So until we have approvals, we're not able to move forward.
So you're talking building permits for your actual construction documents, all your
That's
building
right.
permits. Okay, so you've still got a ways to go to get to that. Because it really can't, until you've got a set of elevations, you can't even pull the trigger on, you're in schematic design right now. It's hard for you to go all the way to construction documents. So
we're quite a ways down on construction documents, but the issue for us is we're not able to go to final closing with our loan until we have your approval.
Okay.
And then an ultimate building permit. Now, could we start clearing? Could we start some grading if we were able to pull a site permit? We might fund that out of equity.
Okay.
So we might be able to start that. We own the land.
Right.
But, it is certainly important to us to get full approvals on everything we're doing.
Well, you don't want any moving targets any more than we do.
No, we sure don't.
But
I do appreciate where you're coming from on that question of percentage of break.
Okay.
Okay, Mark.
How do we craft a motion?
Well, my old motion will just die for a lack of a second. So if somebody else wants to go at it, I think Louise looks energetic enough to be able to jump on this motion.
I don't know that you can craft a motion and accept all the subject twos except 10.
Well, you got to be careful, because if you throw that one out, then you're on the record saying, well, that one doesn't apply.
That's what I mean. What
Right.
do you, how do you?
Defer number 10 to the next meeting.
There you
Okay.
go.
Clear that number 10 will be considered at the
September
end of September.
Approve, per the subject twos, deferring number 10 to the next meeting.
Well, you did a lot better job than I do with my motion. You did yours in about 7 words, and mine take about 55 words. So I will second that motion.
Okay, Mark, are you?
Yeah, I got that.
Okay, we have a first and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we move on to discussion and public hearing on a request for the recommendation to the Board of Mayor and Aldermen concerning traffic calming applications on Thornton Drive in Thornton Heights subdivision.
Yeah, I'm going to turn this over to David Sparks, Assistant Town Engineer, and I can toggle through these slides for him, but he'll give you an overview of this project, what the town's proposing for the traffic calming measures. We've talked a lot about this issue directly and indirectly, and lots of things that we consider, so this is kind of exciting that we've got a subdivision where we're asking to apply these type of techniques. So you can just let me know when you need to go to different slides.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Good evening. Are you tired yet? I know I am, just watching you. So, I'm David Sparks. I'm on staff for the town of Farragut, Assistant Town Engineer. You can go on to the next slide there, Mark. What we're here tonight for is several of the citizens back in September of 16 had submitted a traffic control or a traffic calming application. They were concerned about speeding in the Thornton Heights subdivision. So they've gone through the process, and where we are right now is we've done a study, and we've put together costs and whatnot. We've had public meetings. And what you see on the slide right there is just about all of Thornton Heights. And there's 4 locations of where we as a team, traffic control team, have selected 4 different locations for traffic calming. So if you go on to the next one, Mark. What I wanted to do in this picture here is just it's an aerial view to show the location of each of those traffic calming devices. And we tried to strategically place them so they wouldn't inconvenience folks that are pulling in their driveways or backing out or pulling campers and trying to back in. So that's the reasoning for why they're located where they are, as well as we wanted to get a few of the devices on the Kingston Pike side, and also a couple of devices on the Concord side. The speeds study that we did were somewhat consistent throughout Thornton Road, ranging from 33 to 36 miles per hour. So you can go on to the next one, Mark. This is if you will, a windshield view of where those locations are. I've drawn in those little blue spots there to show you where they would be. And there's a red line there. That's the property line. And you can see there's no driveways at that location either. Again, another one here. It's no conflicts with driveways. And again, this is the final one. No conflict with driveways. So what we're here tonight for, well, I'll go over this one. This is a layout, a typical layout of 2 traffic calming devices. And they're spaced such that emergency vehicles can still traverse over them without interruption of them responding.
Oh, look like, is it a table and then down?
It's basically a table. Yeah, it's a ramp up, and then a flat spot, and then a ramp back down. It's not a bump.
Still made out of asphalt?
No, these are actually made out of a high-density rubber.
Oh, so they're movable. Is that way if you ever
They are
wanted to
movable.
relocate it, you could?
Yeah, they're bolted
Okay.
down or.
Okay.
Is it the same sort of object, I guess, for lack of a better word, that's on Clover Fork?
That's correct. And as a matter of fact, I believe it's the same. The lowest price that we've got is that same maker. So it'll look really the
If
same.
anybody has been through Clover Fork, which is off of East Fox Den, but you definitely have to slow down.
Yes, you do.
And I don't know, one of the things I notice when I go through there, and I used to go through there a lot, is if I were living in a house, might worry that I'm going to hear cars slowing down, hitting that bump, and then speeding up again. Is that an issue?
I'm sorry, I have information on that because I asked the woman that lives right on Clover Fork, right in front of it, and she
wow.
says it's not an issue at all.
Okay.
She's got young children and she's thrilled to have them,
Okay.
and they're right in front of her house.
You know, what I like about this is bicycles can get through it and not have to worry, and people pushing a stroller, especially for a street that doesn't have a sidewalk. It's not like a traditional speed bump where, if you're on a bike, you're going to either flip over forward or do a wheelie one way or another. So, I think this is a great solution.
Yeah, I wanted to touch on the voting too. We had to send out for votes, and 82% of the returned votes affirmed that they wanted to proceed on with traffic calming.
And have
65 is required.
And have they been involved in where the placement is? Are they happy with where the placement of the speed cushions
Yes.
is?
The traffic team, which is made up of 4 residents and then 2 staff members, Daryl and myself. We selected the areas, and several of the residents are here, and the traffic team is here.
But the residents who are next to these they know where that location is. Is that?
I don't know that all of them may know. We haven't contacted each resident that's next to it, unless any of you folks may have, but I have not.
The width is about approximately 6 feet. What's the length?
I think it's 7 feet, no.
So 6 feet wide by about 7 feet
7 feet
long?
long.
Okay. And they're about how thick?
About that, yeah.
About that, thanks.
About that, yeah.
So about 3 inches, 2 to 3 inches, something like that?
Yeah, about 3 inches.
Okay.
Very similar to Clover Fork.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think Noah's been to Clover Fork, so.
A lot of years.
It's, you have to stop. So you're aware of.
They do a pretty good job making you slow down? Now, the question is, do they make the teenagers slow down?
Yes.
So good, good.
Unless they want to launch their car up in the air. In that case,
What I also like about it, what I like about it is I think they look pretty affordable compared to having to do something out of asphalt and mobilization and all that. I think it's a great way of doing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just so superior to any kind of asphalt traffic calming device.
Yeah, to get back to your question, when we sent out the ballots, the vote on it, we did include a map of roughly what we thought would be the locations with addresses. Yeah.
You want to talk to her over this? Okay.
Well, they received the map with the ballot.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's
Everybody in the affected area got a ballot to vote and a map.
David, I'm sorry, go ahead, you had your question first.
One of the things that you all discussed as a part of your committee that, one reason that has the speeds is also it uses a cut through to go all the way around and avoid the red light and everything else down.
Well, they suspect that there's
just
some.
move the traffic to the next road in Thornton Heights.
And then Uland.
Yeah.
They still have to go across the couple.
Yeah,
They still got the one down by the church.
yeah, they'll still have two that they'll have to go over. And that's one of the reasons it was some were on that area. That was where the speeding,
Hopefully
the
it'll
highest
also take
speeding
some of
was.
the traffic out of the subdivision.
Yeah.
Rather than go through there and do that, I'll just.
What's the 85th percentile level? What is that you decide that a speed bump is warranted? Is that 35 miles per hour?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. That's the policy.
Because that's not written in our policy itself. So we have, and that particular number isn't in there. And in the policy doesn't have the road classifications. We only currently allow it on local streets, correct?
Correct.
I am interested in maybe exploring expanding that to local collectors. We have a few streets that are considered local collectors and are turning into major collectors for the same reason. The Sonia Drive is the one I'm thinking of, although given the incline of that street, I'm not sure that you find a place where you can put speed bumps, but they have an issue because it's used as cut through. And yeah. But yours is probably a local street.
Yeah.
Yours is a local street. Sonia is considered a local collector. And we also have the issue on, there's the other one, Union Road. The part we're not repairing, I'm assuming, is a local collector, and they have the same issue. People are using it as cut-through traffic, and they can't even pull out of their driveways without someone. It's dangerous. So I would love it if we explored that opportunity.
Anybody else have any questions or comments, or anybody in the audience?
Well, I know that.
I need you to come up.
I'm Lewis Howard, 10820 Thornton Drive. And
Can you say that again into the microphone, please?
I am Lewis Howard, 10820 Thornton Drive. And I just want to tell you guys, these two gentlemen right here have been a blessing for us, because I've been complaining about this for years. And when they started on it, they saw what we were talking about, and luckily they agreed. And so hopefully now we're going to get something done, and we appreciate it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you driven over the?
Yes, ma'am.
And on Clover Fork, you know what you're getting into?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I think they made a great decision on that, too.
Okay. Thank you. I just want people to know what they're getting into.
It's been a long time, Mr. Howard.
What? We always say that 65% is our threshold on the votes. Is that right? We got 82 here,
Correct.
That's great.
Anybody else any questions or comments?
I move for approval.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Thank you. Thanks for all your work.
Thank you all.
Discussion and item number 11, discussion and update on the master plan for McPhee Park.
Hi, I'm Sue Stool, the Parks and Leisure Services Director for the town of Farragut. We're here to talk about the new updated McPhee Park master plan. Included in last year's fiscal or capital investment plan was the update for the master plan, and subsequently moving forward with the next phase of the park. We have had 2 phases completed. The plan was last updated about 5 years ago, and the Board of Mayor and Aldermen approved a contract with Ross Fowler for the project last September. So, this is the plan that is being proposed. McPhee Park is a 61-acre site with approximately 35, your memo says 25, but that's a typo. It's 35 acres left for future development. Here's the master plan in front of you, and it includes the following additional facilities and amenities. A racquet court area with 6 tennis courts, 4 pickleball courts, hitting wall, and restroom. Destination playground geared for older children and young teens. Dog park with both large and small dog areas. Amphitheater with a restroom and storage and a small meeting or prep room. Disc golf course with 18 holes. This would be a wooded course with a small pavilion. Large lawn area, we're calling the Great Lawn area, for events with 2 pavilions and restrooms. Maintenance building, an additional small pavilion and small lawn area near our current splash pad. Additional parking with a net gain of about 230 spaces. Additional ADA walking trails and additional natural or challenge walking trails that would not necessarily be ADA compliant. Variety of open picnic table locations throughout the park. These elements have been very well vetted over the past year and are the result of many months of interviews, surveys, public hearings, workshops, and the Parks and Athletics Council has also reviewed and approved this master plan. Once this plan has been approved, if it is approved, the development of the park will need to occur in phases as approved in the future CIP. And the current CIP includes monies for the development of construction plans for the next phase, which will be the topic of conversation in upcoming Board of Mayor and Alderman meetings. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer.
Are you at liberty to mention what the next phase would be?
We don't know. We have 8 options right now. So
This is awesome. What an asset to the town of Farragut. Really, this could be a host site for all the festivals that need, the red, white, and blues, and the food festival. You got tons of parking, and you've got tons of green areas, and you got restrooms. You got all the things that really bring the ingredients together. I wish I could just snap my fingers and it would be done. Unfortunately, there's many millions of dollars that we've got to spend. But what a great asset, really, and for all of Knox County.
I think so too. It's a beautiful plan.
I have a question about the destination playground. Is this area surrounded by a wooded area?
It is. It's old hardwoods that are up there, but it's sort of up on a knoll. So
my concern is, and we've had this in my neighborhood in an area where we have somebody's backyard who is not in our neighborhood, but also part of our homeowner's property. That's a wooded area. We have people, I don't know if it's kids but people who are in that area at night doing things that's against the law. This area looks to me to be very isolated.
It's not as isolated as you think. It's actually a lot closer. That's been a topic of discussion with many different people, and it's closer than you would think. They're old hardwoods, so you're talking about, not a lot of brush and infill. And again, we're just looking at the overall plan and not the details of each little facility yet, so that would be taken into account. One of my recommendations, and we've talked at length about this, for this new phase, it would come with cameras. It's the way of what we need to do in the future. So.
Do you have any problems with that night visitors at any of the places?
We do. I mean, all the parks are subject to people. I would knock on wood. We've been very lucky. Every park everywhere is going to have vandalism. It's just the nature of that thing. No matter whether you lock it or not, it's going to happen. Sometimes it's worse when you lock it. But we've been very, very lucky that it's been very minimal. So having said that, again, I think cameras is a good idea in all of our new, and we're actually looking at trying to put some in now. It's to start with at one of our parks.
Good.
I think closing gates at night is actually not a good thing because it just makes it too private for somebody to sneak back in there and know that no one's going to drive through.
Yeah, there's a lot of controversy about that, whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. Different communities do it different ways. We haven't had a ton of problems with it. There are better ways to do it now, but in the old days of the town, we did actually gate our parks, and we had quite a bit of problems where when we tried to close up, we couldn't find the people that were parked there.
You found a car parked in there, and you go at 10 o'clock at night to close up, and you can't find any people.
Right.
And
there are gates now that you can, people can get out that you can't get back in, but you're going to get about a 50-50 vote about whether it's a good thing or a bad thing.
Typically, kind of an agreement that we have with the Knox County Sheriff's Department is that we have 2 patrol officers in the town at all times. And is this something, do we kind of encourage the patrol officers at night when obviously they're in the southwest quadrant of the town to do a quick drive-through now and just circle around and get back out?
And they have keys to our restrooms. That's a big key.
Oh, and that's probably a good thing.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's a big thing. So, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, it's not perfect. I'm not saying it is.
Right, but it helps their presence.
Yeah, and any of these parks, if in the future we wanted to put gates in, we could definitely do that. So,
I do.
This will have a lot of lighting, just like our other part. The other part of the park, which is well lit. So,
I do have someone that's signed up to speak on this when y'all are ready.
I have a few concerns. I know that as we went through the process, struggling with the balance of tennis courts and pickleball courts, my understanding is that pickleball is very popular. In fact, Sedgefield just changed over one of their tennis courts to pickleball courts. So I know that this is a little nitpicky, looking for the opportunity for some flexibility there, because who knows what the next racket sport is.
This is true.
So I would love to see a little bit more thought into making sure that we're flexible with that. Maybe the restrooms don't need to be at one end. Maybe they need to be in this central zone. Something to be considered. But the bigger thing to me is I don't think if we are going to invest in an amphitheater, I don't think this is the location for an amphitheater. I think if we invest in an amphitheater, it needs to be in our town center. Amphitheaters are a way to bring people in. Hopefully they come in early, park their car, go to dinner, go to whatever event you're having at your amphitheater, go back out to whatever nightlife we've got going on, but you have someone park in their car once. This is in our southeast section. It's a community park. Getting people out there, it's going to be for the event. We're not going to see a lot of rollover from that. People come to the event and then leave. I just don't think that we need to invest in an amphitheater in the McPhee Park. I think we should probably, because we've got this great large green field where if we're going to have an event out there, we can just put up tents. We have that opportunity and we could wire it for what we need to for electricity there, and then save that amphitheater for in a more central location where it could really give us some more bang for our buck. So that's the only concern I've ever really had about the McPhee Park is including an amphitheater there.
I don't disagree. What I do like about this is so much parking, and I think those are areas that, like, for instance, if you think about the summer concert series at the, what do we call the park on Campbell Station now? The
Founders.
Founders Park. We struggle with parking there in that little amphitheater for that, and so I see both. I like the parking here because I haven't counted it, but we've got to be 400 or 500 spots, and that can accommodate a lot of people where we're going to struggle in other areas. We've struggled at Renaissance with parking and struggled at down next to the Farragut Press building at parking, and even I'm not sure how the parking turned out at West End, but I think having a cultural activity more in the town center does make more sense. We're not sure exactly what that town center is going to look like someday, but I do think we're talking really conceptual right now, based upon with some things that have some elasticity to it that can have some push and pulls. At what time would this body or even the Board of Mayor and Aldermen start seeing more final plans as you're working through the phase, just one phase at a time?
One phase at a time. So we would move forward with whatever the board decides the next phase is going to be, and we'll start working on those construction plans. I think, what this phase will be more, whatever phase is chosen, whatever it is, things will change once surveys are done, and very specific things are looked at. There will be some adaptation, but it will be, out of all the future, it will probably be the closest to what you have now. My experience is, as phases go and you spend 10, 12 years building something out, there will be changes to those future phases to hit nuances that we didn't even know existed right now that in 12 years might need an adaptation. The courts may be, if we don't do that right away, that may be something, that we definitely would look at. So while, the concept is important, it's not concrete. Yes.
I will say this about the Founders Park. That is the perfect location for that because it showcases our community in its finest. One of the finest things we do is it's an amazing event, and I can't imagine tucking that event back in McPhee Park. I think a lot of people probably stop in just driving down Campbell Station Road because it is in such a central part of our community. And people are parking over at the school and walking over. They park at the library. They park at the church across the street. So parking isn't quite as much of an issue. People figure out how to get there and they walk over. It is, I think it's such an amazing event in that park.
I agree. There are two schools of thoughts about amphitheaters, and you'll find them in both in the same city. A central area where you're near business districts, definitely. There's drawbacks to that. Noise is a huge one. Competing interests, sometimes parking or space. Amphitheaters like the one in Brentwood, this is Eddie Arnold, that's a destination. People will go to it because it's a destination and it's out in a natural kind of feeling. So one's not better in my mind than the other. It's really what do we want to do. Regardless of what happens there, one of the things that the staff would really like to see is some venue, whether it's the amphitheater that can be adapted or another thing for us to allow to rent for weddings, because we had a ton of requests and we are not set up for that. And it could be a nice little revenue source. It's not huge, but it does bring people into town. People stay in your hotels, so it was our thought about what could also happen at the amphitheater. So whether it's in that form or another form, and this, in the 8 options that we have, the amphitheater is not in any of the 8, so it's got a ways to go.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to see the board of mayor and aldermen ultimately try to get the road through, and then we're going to have these little nodes, these little pocket areas that you can have some creativity in the future, and as things change in popularity. But what would be nice, instead of just working on necessarily just one phase that's right next to where we are now, but try to get the road that gets all the way around. It seems like that would make sense when you're doing kind of mass grading, kind of road building, to get all the way that you get your second entrance on McPhee Road. So whatever, there's a couple of aldermen here, and it seems like that would make sense in the next phase. You get the hard part over with, and that way you can also walk out there and start visualizing a little bit easier than you can, right now trying to get through the woods.
Financially, you're better off because you're not recreating it further down the road. And this is what we hope is a fairly balanced site, but it's going to take a lot of movement. There is a lot of grading with this site, a lot of grading. So it's not going to be cheap.
And the only way I'd want to see that is if we could actually do the road and finish the lawn, because that's a lot of trees you're removing. And if you're just going to do the road and then not do the lawn right, it's just going to be an eyesore.
Well, and there may be, like what Sue was saying, to balance the site, you may need to do kind of all your mass grading, and so we may just have pretty fields and a road, maybe not even all the parking lots, and then have future kind of pad areas for these activity nodes.
The Great Lawn area and where the road is doesn't impact really good hardwoods. The design has really just gotten into scrubby junk.
Okay.
So that's where the playground is up on the hill, and of course all the stuff that's in the back that has quite a topographically challenged area. That's where your Christmas trees from the Christmas tree farm and your old hardwoods are. The rest of it's not all that beautiful, honestly.
What is it as far as that's a pretty? I'm spatially kind of not very good at that, but I imagine maintaining that is going to be a pretty penny.
It will cost some money, and it will cost money to program.
Okay.
Could you remind us what portion of this thing was funded this year for next year's budget, or this year's budget?
Well, in this year's budget, there's $350,000 for survey and construction plans for the next phase. And then the next year's CIP, proposed CIP, has $3 million. But that was just, it's not been,
how slow it's going to be.
Right. You said there was some.
Anybody else have any questions or comments?
We have
one person
Okay.
signed up.
Hello, my name is Kelly Clancy. I live at 376 Dominion Circle. I came specifically for this item. Parks are wonderful, and first, thank you all for your service. You do a fantastic job. Just listening to you, it reinforces, the dedication you have. The parks we have are absolutely wonderful, and thanks to the people in the past that have developed those. At some point, though, you need to go ahead and take care of the current infrastructure, specifically roads, also maintaining the parks we currently have. As this lady had just stated, it'll take a pretty penny to go ahead and maintain this. I'm not saying never do it. Now it's not the time to do it. The analogy I'd like to draw is if your roof is leaking, you don't put a swimming pool in the backyard. you need to go ahead and attend to what needs to be done, specifically roads. Roads need to be the first item for our community. Developing property, Ms. Pavlin had mentioned about the Union Road expansion earlier this evening. We get that done. And this is what I've heard. I don't know if it's correct, but I believe it is if we develop the property off of Union Road, that will give us 155 new property owners, which will help develop the community. And I've heard it's going to be $4 to $5 million for that. I've also heard the development of the park is going to be 12 to 13 million. Now, again, I'm all for parks, but at some point you need to go ahead and get meat and potatoes free of ice cream and cake. And you can hold off on this. I think this is a wonderful project. Now it's not the time to do it. 5 years from now, it could be 3 years from now. Let's get the Union Road property, road expansion taken care of. 155 new property owners. Let's say 400 to 500,000. Noah's probably more attuned to that. Get that done. Again, I'm not, against this. Now's not the time to do it. That's all I have to say. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Clancy, I think we have some of the best roads in the county. I'm not saying there's not room for improvement, but I think if you drive anywhere in the county, I think we're great stewards of our money. We take money that maybe a lot of other folks couldn't figure out how to stretch the dollar, and we do a really good job with it. Are there other improvements? I mean, Union Road, we actually have figured out a way to fund it concurrently with the project on this. And I agree with you. Obviously, if we had holes in the dam, we don't need to be, the roof's leaking. But I quite frankly don't think the roof's leaking. If the roof was leaking, I'd like to know about it. If you're observing things that I'm missing, or maybe we are missing in the town, of where would be best to spend our taxpayer dollars, your dollars, I'd like to hear about it.
Okay, number one, you don't need to spend every dollar you have in the bank. Does that make sense?
Sure.
You don't need to do that. Again, I'm all for this park. We don't need to do it now. Who knows what's going to happen down the road? But no, I live in Village Green subdivision, and they did resurface some of our roads. And no, not all the roads are that great. And we need to expand some roads. Look at like Virtue Road. It's like a terribly dangerous road. That should be expanded. There's other, collector or feeder roads that need to be attended to. Now, I've noticed if you look from the roundabout going back from North Shore, going, I don't know how far down, I know it goes beyond Pellissippi Parkway, that's all been resurfaced. Mm-hmm. You look at that, Noah, and then you look at, some of the roads we have here, there's a lot of room for improvement. Now, according to, and I was sat in on a meeting on the impact fee, they were trying to go ahead and charge developers, $4,000 per lot, and that would have ended up, maybe 100 building permits. That would have provided $400,000. Now, what is a linear foot to build a road? You're looking at what, $1,000 a foot?
Probably with sidewalks and walking trails and building to a collector standard, probably so.
Okay, if you had 100 builders, $4,000, that would give you 400 feet. That's less than a block. That's half a block, not even half a block. So there's room for improvement. Also, during that impact study I happened to be at, I think Mr. Smith had said, or maybe not Mr. Smith, but it was $40 million what we needed to have for our roads.
Mm-hmm. I was in that meeting. You're exactly right. If you tallied everything up, it was a significant amount of money.
So, I'm not saying it's like torn up to pieces, but we need to go ahead, put money in the bank to attend to these things. You know, $12 to $13 million in a park, again, I'm all for it later on down the road. Let's take care of the needs that need to be attended to before we go ahead and move forward in the park. You know, I love the parks. I mean, Campbell Station or Founders Park, whatever you call it, I walk it every single day, and I'm very grateful for it. And I'm not trying to deny other people. I'm just saying that we need to go ahead and be responsible stewards for the money that is, or you all need to be. I'm not among you. Before you start spending money, you need to go ahead and attend to things that need to be taken care of, and salt waste money. Because some hard times can be coming. Who knows?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the things that Sue hasn't mentioned is the grants. Sue and the engineering department both do an excellent job of getting grants for the town of Farragut, for roads, and for the Parks and Recreation Department.
And we will definitely, keep going on that. The biggest grant available for us right now is a state grant from real estate tax transfer fees, and that's every other year. So we would definitely keep moving ahead on that.
Anybody else with any questions or comments?
I'd just offer an observation from Mr. Clancy. What we're looking at is just us approving the concept plan from a site, from a development type frame. The board, mayor, and alderman will address, the phasing and the amount of money and the actual money. So, your words, I encourage you to go to their meeting and express your views there.
I will, thank you.
So we need to
Make a recommendation
make a
on this, yes.
recommendation. Do I have a motion for that? Recommendation, we have to make a recommendation on this.
Recommendation on the master plan, updated master plan for McPhee Park.
I move to recommend approval of the McPhee Park master plan update.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Oppose? Thank you. Do we need to, is it time for a
No,
tape
it's actually
change?
3 hours is when we have to,
Okay.
unless y'all need a break just for other reasons, which is perfectly fine. We can do that if you want to.
We ready to move on?
All right, ready to move on.
Number 12, discussion on an update to the sinkhole ordinance.
I'm going to turn this one over to Bart Hose, the Assistant Community Development Director. He's done all the work on this. I give him all these really easy things to do, so that, but he's done a great job trying to formulate this update, and he can go over how we got here and what we're proposing to have revisited in this ordinance.
You could have waited till the telecommunications for him.
Yeah, I know. He came a little late, didn't he? That's probably why she left. That telecommunications ordinance.
Well, this is a first. This is his first time to appear before us and talk.
And again, I'm Bart Hose. I'm the Assistant Community Development Director for the town of Farragut. And I am here to talk about possible amendments to the town's sinkhole ordinance. This particular item was referred to y'all by the board of, actually by a recent decision and a recommendation that was made by the Board of Zoning Appeals. Recently, the board heard a variance request from the Dollar General store to fill a portion of an identified sinkhole area to support the extension and construction of a required interparcel connection drive and a walking trail as part of the project. The sinkhole was not initially developed or was not found early on in the site review process. It came to light afterwards, and so they were trying to deal with that design issue. The town staff was actually not opposed to granting the variance. We felt that it was in line with the town's connectivity goals. It supported the future expansion of a walking trail along Kingston Pike. And we didn't really feel like it was significantly increasing the pre-existing impacts to the sinkhole in question, which the bulk of that sinkhole was actually located on the other side of Kingston Pike from the development site. But the BZA, when it reviewed the application, they ended up feeling that the language in the existing sinkhole ordinance was so specific that they had to basically deny the request, and they felt that it really needed to be addressed from a legislative standpoint and not from their variance authority. So that's why we're before you tonight. We've been working on several possible amendments to the sinkhole ordinance. They're really intended to clarify the ordinance because there was some confusion that the board had when they reviewed it. We're trying to provide some flexibility for instances where there might be a conflict between another competing public policy interest. And in this case, that was connectivity, which is now a big part of the town's goals, and also is subject to some recent amendments in the zoning ordinance to facilitate that sort of thing. And the potential exists for there to be conflicts between the sinkhole ordinance and those other public policy goals. And then also we identified a third case that we thought we'd deal with. So our proposals for possible amendments are in blue in the text that you have in front of you in the zoning ordinance. On page 2 was one amendment to try to clarify what needs to be done to try to identify sinkholes on the front end. We think that's one problem in that some of the developers and their design professionals aren't actually getting out on the property and walking the property to help identify those on the front end, and that's a potential problem. So we tried to nail that down a little bit better. And then really the meat of what we're proposing is on page 3 in the blue text. And we tried to carve out 3 possible, limited exceptions to where you might allow fill within a sinkhole, again, in a very limited capacity. We're very sensitive to the overall purposes of the sinkhole ordinance, and we want to make sure that the sinkholes are really avoided whenever possible. But there could be instances where it might be reasonable to at least contemplate filling a portion of a sinkhole. So really the 3 conditions that we had in there, or the 3 scenarios. The first was where avoidance is clearly not possible, and that was actually already in the text of the ordinance, of the existing ordinance. The second is where a sinkhole is identified during construction, and that came out of some internal discussions at the staff level, to where there have been some projects to where a large commercial development is in process of construction. They're doing heavy earth moving, and there's a dropout. So there was no way they could have really known that sinkhole was there in advance. But it's identified, and it becomes problematic because filling it is technically a violation of your sinkhole ordinance. So how do you deal with that? So we thought we'd try to address that in some limited fashion. And then the third is actually the most significant, and that's the one that came out of the discussions with the Board of Zoning Appeals. And that relates to how do you deal with possible filling of a sinkhole where there's another, public policy purpose behind that filling, and where the sinkhole may conflict with that purpose. In this case, it had to do a lot with the town's connectivity goals, but you could also see it with the development of a city park or something like that, to where a sinkhole is found, and you have to make a decision, which is the greater public purpose, protecting the sinkhole or carrying out, the other, goal or objective or thing that, that the public is trying to achieve through, some program or some project. So what we tried to do is provide some guidance and language there for the Planning Commission, to evaluate that sort of thing, and also for the staff internally to be able to evaluate when and how to go about making those decisions. And then below that, on page 3 and continuing over onto page 4, are some conditions we thought might be reasonable to place on when fill is contemplated. Again, we don't want to encourage people to be filling sinkholes or disturbing sinkholes. We really want to encourage design around them whenever and wherever possible. So we tried to come up with some conditions to place on it so it doesn't get too out of control. And then the final thing that we added was over on page 5. In discussions with the Board of Zoning Appeals at the time, they also felt like there wasn't a lot of guidance in the sinkhole ordinance as to how they should go about contemplating when they are pressed into granting a variance to it. So we borrowed heavily from the zoning ordinance, and these are some of the conditions that are typically placed on the board when they're contemplating granting a variance to the zoning ordinance, which is different than the sinkhole ordinance, which is a freestanding municipal code type ordinance. So we have this before you tonight really for discussion purposes. Actually, we have another variance that's going before the Board of Zoning Appeals that deals with sinkholes at the next meeting that's a drainage issue. So we may want to take a look and see whether or not we need to make any other additional tweaks to this before it comes back to you regarding that. I'm not sure how much we'll need to do about that, but we did want to get your input and some feedback from you on these proposals. And then one last note is we also questioned whether or not the Board of Zoning Appeals was, the proper appellate body for the sinkhole ordinance, or if there might be a better board in the town, maybe stormwater advisory or something like that, that might have some technical expertise to deal with those type of issues. But that was just something, again, we, just at an internal staff level, we were brainstorming about. So, y'all have any questions? You have any comments on the language we've put in here? Things that you'd like to see added or striked from it, or clarifications you think need to be made?
Can we put that into the ordinance that we use stormwater advisory as, leave it in the Board of Zoning Appeals, but have stormwater advisory or stormwater, whatever they're called, be part of that process?
Well, you can do that. I mean, it would potentially lengthen the process. Now, the Board of Zoning Appeals, the older members, like Ron and Keith, have got a lot of training in sinkholes because we try to do that with them since we knew they were the appellate body. They do have 3 new members that don't really have a strong background, at least to my knowledge, in sinkholes. We do need to do some additional training with them on that topic. But I think if it were a drainage-related issue, that would be perfectly logical for it to be diverted, taken to the Stormwater Advisory Committee, at least initially, and then they could potentially make a recommendation to whomever, the Board of Zoning Appeals, if necessary. We were just kind of thinking out loud, keeping everything on the table with that. It's nothing against, of course, the Board of Zoning Appeals. They do a great job. We were just thinking about if the Stormwater Advisory Committee may have a little more technical. They do require an engineer on that board, and that could be valuable if the issue is drainage related, which sometimes these sinkholes are. But there's more than just that involved with our concerns over sinkholes, like structural issues that aren't necessarily addressed with TDEC, for example's permitting process. They only look at it purely from a groundwater perspective. They don't really give you an opinion on structural concerns. So, and Bart's got some language in there that I think adds some clarity about the professionals that we would need to be making determinations on these matters, because apparently, and this is something we need to be sure we address in this update, I'm finding out that TDEC apparently doesn't make determinations anymore as they used to. I don't know if it's a staffing issue or a philosophical issue or both. So we're going to have to make sure that we give an applicant direction on who they would take their information to, so that that person could make the proper determination that may be acceptable to the town. So we'll be addressing that and making sure that that's in this update.
You know, eventually we'll end up developing a list of qualified professionals that can make that. I mean, it used to be Carolyn from TDEC. She was the only one that could do it. And,
Yeah.
you know, if you wanted a determination, you better get in line and wait 6 months. Yeah. And so I think this is a much better route. There's some language in here that I really do like that in 3C, when you say proportional to the public interest involved, I think that's magical language, and that's exactly what I think you were going after with the connectivity. So going real quickly, the Dollar General store, so you're saying as it stands right now, the Dollar General store has taken that part of the site plan about that future connectivity out pending what we're doing tonight.
Yes.
So we do want to get this solved. I understand why the BZA was nervous about it. And I think legislatively is probably the best way to do it, and also sets a precedent for the future about our expectations about when, why, and what you can do.
Yeah.
So I think you guys have done a really good job, Bart and Mark, with getting some good language in here that really makes sense.
Before we get into that, I'd like to see Dollar General's plan put up and show what we're talking about, what's brought this whole thing up. Where is the trail going? Why do they need to fill it? Can you pull those plans
I
up?
don't have it in front of me. I should have probably thought about putting that in the packet, but I didn't.
Could you pull up KGIS on this and throw it up there, and you could draw it in and kind
I
of
know
show?
there's a small sinkhole area, and it's in the near Kingston Pike.
It's that Wentworth, the Wentworth
actually-
townhomes. It's that big giant one
Kingston
on the other
Pike
side.
actually goes over this sinkhole, and
But
part of the
does
north.
that sinkhole not also go across Foxton Course?
Go where?
Not that big.
It may not be that big. I don't think.
Well,
it's that big.
there's a
Part of that-
series of depressions that do kind of run in a northeastern direction.
I'm sure they're probably interconnected. The water and the aquifer and all that's probably all interconnected.
Right. I mean, we noticed that when we looked at the larger topographic information, and that was part of our recommendation and analysis with the Board of Zoning Appeals, was to look at not just the Dollar General property, but what's around it and where are connections likely to occur in the future, so that we're thinking about that, because you might do something on their property that you find out that there's a sinkhole somewhere else that you're going to run into the same issue.
The problem is isn't that pretty much a crapshoot as far as, okay, we can put this here and they could be running into a sinkhole you're not aware of.
Well, the heavily wooded areas are your challenges, because those areas, the aerial photography and the GIS information, those are the areas that aren't easily being able to find those closed contours. Big wide open fields, usually those are relatively easy to find, but I think what happened here is they started going in there and clearing and
then
well, I raised that question early on because we all knew the sinkhole, the throat and everything was on the south side of Kingston Pike, and I said, make sure you verify that there's nothing on your property. And they apparently talked with TDEC, and initially TDEC said, yeah, it's been terminated by Kingston Pike. So we proceeded. Then when I don't know why that went out, but anyway, when they came back and got a second person's opinion at TDEC, apparently they felt that it was, and then when they cleared it out, then it was kind of apparent to us just looking at it in the field that it looked like a sinkhole. I mean, it's a depressional area. So
Petty, it runs along the property line between their, I guess, what's the far east, north?
Yeah. Well, it'd probably be their far west.
Yes.
It was on the Dollar General store's eastern property line.
Closer to the Foxton entrance.
Mhm.
Yes,
Yes,
that's
sir.
further away from the big one at the townhomes in Wentworth.
No,
it's thought it would have been right.
Kind of right across the street.
Yeah,
right across the street.
Yeah.
it is, and it was a small sort of finger projection that sort of ran up the property line, maybe 100 feet up the property line, if that, maybe less. It was only, I think, maybe one closed contour deep, so it was maybe only 2 feet, at most 4 feet. It actually drained to a culvert that goes underneath Kingston Pike and then drains into that larger
sinkhole.
Yes, sir. And
It's an odd.
Well,
what they were proposing was to put the walking trail parallel to Kingston Pike, there along the street frontage, and then also a driveway connection from that lot with the parking lot in the front to the lot adjoining to the east.
That would be that future commercial lot, and it makes
How about a
sense.
sinkhole on that too?
Well, actually, that was part of the discussion with the Board of Zoning Appeals, was that if they granted it on this lot, they were also going to have to grant it on the adjoining lot at some point in the future. And, yeah, and the language was so specific, there was, in the existing language, it really boxed the Board of Zoning Appeals in, so they were in a bind on
Basically
it.
saying an applicant had no way to demonstrate a hardship no matter what. And that's really what we got into with the BZA.
Well, we did look at the possibility of them redesigning and in discussions with the town engineer, he thought that it would be better, to leave the walking trail up along Kingston Pike. There were concerns about, even tying into the adjoining properties and how that connectivity would stretch across the entire frontage. So it was a really tough balancing act in trying to make a recommendation to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and then I think they had a really difficult time deciding how to deal with it given the existing language in the ordinance.
Relative to the
We have a
modification,
member here, if you.
Mark, relative to the modifications we're reading here, I would assume this has all been vetted with the BZA
Well,
as far as comments before it would come to us?
not yet.
As they would be the
Not
user?
yet.
This is for discussion only.
Yeah.
I'm talking about being vetted with it.
Trouble with filling sinkholes.
Yeah, so do we.
And we should.
So do we.
That's
Yeah.
a very, that was the language
And
that.
I'm not sure a walking trail isn't enough to fill one.
And it may not be, and that would be something that you'd have to determine. In this case, it was very unique because, the portion of the sinkhole was really isolated from the main sinkhole. It was sort of like the upper reaches of a large sinkhole, and they were really, just talking about, filling a small portion of it. And it was really separated from the throat and the main part of the sinkhole by Kingston Pike.
I understand all that.
And
I still don't
yeah.
I still have a problem with filling any of it.
yeah, I can appreciate that.
Because I think it runs quite a ways.
Well, I mean, there's also a school of thought of thinking where that walking trail, that ultimately is heading east towards the Fox Den entrance, how on earth we're ever going to be able to connect it to anything. And, is that even a scenario that maybe the walking trail, just worry about getting the walking trail to the west down to Old Stage Road, to the stoplight eventually, being that it's going to be real tough to go through all the property right there at Fox Den and without a major road widening project. But
And there are potential costs involved, to the town if that type of infrastructure is put on a sinkhole. But again, we were trying to write this so that, design around is going to be the default, at all times. But if for some reason you had, the last linkage between, a walking trail or a greenway, and it was a matter of, I don't know, maybe you had a sinkhole that was 40 feet deep, and it was a matter of skirting right around the edge and just the top contour of that. Might it be worth that trade-off to get, and that's not a decision staff can make. And so it's really a decision for a public body such as yourself to weigh the pros and cons of that, with staff input on what's the greater public good, the connectivity or, the possibility of filling,
If somebody loses a house, what
Yeah.
is the greater good?
Well, this is I'm sorry, go ahead, Rita.
My question is, if it's okay for us to allow fill for a public project, and I come along and I want to put my driveway, which we had this issue several years ago. Somebody wanted to move their driveway because it made their house look better, and they were a doctor. But then they have an argument of, well, you can do it because you're a public entity. Why can't I do it when I'm paying for it myself? Is that an issue?
Well, I think
It
the
puts the
language
town in
that is
liability
existing is
itself.
talking about an existing road, non-local street, that you or widening or doing something with it. So the facility's already there. It's not like somebody's putting a new driveway in a new location. The facility's there. You're kind of tied to that location. So if you're going to improve that facility, there's really, unless you just tear it out and totally rebuild it somewhere else, which is, would be a huge expense. The only option you really have is to try to, improve it where it's at. So that's why that language was in there. So it was a pretty narrow condition as to when you could do that. So I think you could clearly, differentiate that kind of scenario with somebody's preference, because with the Board of Zoning Appeals, as Ron well knows, we hear a lot of preference-related requests, and that would not be preference if there's an existing street, that the only way to make it better is to widen it in its place. Then, that's really not a preference issue. It's just reality. It's the only place we could do it.
I don't think the new language takes any of the teeth out of our
No.
ordinance. I really don't.
And that was certainly not our intent, as Bart mentioned. We strongly value protecting the sinkholes, believe me. We're not trying to take any
Well, what
teeth
if
out of
on
it.
the properties adjacent, the sinkhole is where somebody wants to put a building? Are we going to tell them they can fill it?
Well, no, I think the language in here, again, as Bart mentioned, the default is you need to avoid it.
Well, I think it also, there was something that I brought up, that proportional to the public interest.
Yeah,
And I think it has to be proportional or exceeding.
yes.
There has to be something so just because I want to put a driveway or a building,
Yeah.
that doesn't, is not proportional to the public interest.
Yeah, convenience is not, Ron Williams, 449 Sugarwood Drive, I'm on the Board of Zoning Appeals. Convenience is something that we look at that we don't, in other words, just because it's more convenient, that don't mean that we're going to change anything. And primarily what was written is what we had to go by. I think we may have took a lot of heat because we did turn it down, but we had to go, according to Keith, being a lawyer, we had to primarily go by what's written. And then our suggestion was to bring it back to you. I also think that the thought of going to stormwater is a good idea. And the reason being, I've been to sinkhole classes. I've been to 3 of them. And I would strongly advise that if Bidge has another one set up, that all of you go, because it is very enlightening as far as why this happens. And when we looked at this particular one, the amount of ditch, if you want to call it, that was on that side of the road versus what was at Wentworth was considerably different. And if it hadn't have been for the language, we would probably would have looked at this differently. And the reason being is, when you look at that, once they've uncovered it, there's a drainage there. It looks like somebody has put a drain in because it goes underneath the road, and it has a natural fall. This drainage culvert has a natural fall. So somebody, when they built Kingston Pike, decided that they were going to put a drainage ditch under there. And it has the right amount of fall for a drainage ditch from this sinkhole, if that's what it is. The thing that really concerned me also was that if we allowed to fill it for the sidewalk and the connectivity road to the other piece of property, then after so many years, then all of a sudden we're responsible for it. Now, if you look at past with sinkholes in this town, we ended up having to fill sinkholes to fix something that was not really on us, okay? And I think you could go one step further and put a little bit more liability on the people that do this, that do go over a sinkhole, if that's the case, that, if that's what y'all decide to do. Because I think, was it 2 years, Mark?
On what?
Well, if they were to fill the sinkhole.
Oh, yeah, for the maintenance letter of credit.
And pave over it, and then put the walking trail.
Minimum of 2 years.
I think if there was a subgrade failure,
yes,
then they would be responsible for 2 years. And quite frankly, it would only be we would only inherit what's in the right of way. So the driveway connectivity, as long as it's on the parcel, the private parcel, we shouldn't inherit any liability on that.
Well, we would on the walking.
We wouldn't on the Dollar General, not on the road, but we would on the walking
Yeah,
trail, though.
Just like we do on sidewalks
Yeah.
anywhere else.
Now, one thing they did do was they did move the foundation location over.
Yeah, to the west.
Now, by doing that,
The foundation of the building?
yes.
Oh, I didn't, the building was moved?
Slightly to the
Yeah.
west, yeah.
Now, with this in mind, that was a very good idea because not knowing what was going to happen with this, something we discussed, and of course, being a Board of Zoning Appeals, it's not really our position to recommend. And we even had a citizen, I think, that thought we were out of line with it, but we weren't because, I mean, we were trying to give them ideas of things to do, and we were looking at possible other ways to put in a sidewalk as far as location on the property, and the same thing with connectivity. But the problem that is that those lots are split along Kingston Pike. The front side is commercial, and the back side is residential. So you really, you don't know. And then that other piece of property that's to the east, it shows on the topo map that it does have some depressions, but that's all it says, and you really don't know. But again, if you follow the water, as we call it, and that's another reason I think stormwater, it would probably need to go to stormwater first and let them review it before it would ever go to us or anybody else for that matter. It's because that right there looks like to me personally that that's a drainage ditch that runs under the Kingston Pike, because Kingston Pike's been built on top of that sinkhole for a long, long time. And if you look at it, I've never seen where it's sunk.
I've never seen any failures there that have been repaired.
Anyway, that's,
It has been on Pellissippi a couple of times.
yeah, but that's not Pellissippi. That's just that particular depression. But I've also went down to that sinkhole there by Wentworth after a very, very heavy rain. And guess what? There's no water in it.
Not a drop in it.
Nope. It goes somewhere. So, and it's not through that pipe that goes underneath the road. It don't back up onto the Dollar General property. I went
There's
down
a
there.
big
looking.
cave down there somewhere.
Yeah, where does it go?
So,
Yeah.
They go in.
any questions for me? None?
So do we need to add language in this ordinance for stormwater advisory, or do we want to make stormwater advisory the appellate body?
Well, it's,
I mean, do we want all sinkhole variance requests to go to stormwater advisory, or just times when there's going to be stormwater potentially draining into the sinkhole?
I don't know.
A variance request with the BZA.
And I would say here, really, one of the things we tried to do is get less things going to the Board of Zoning Appeals. So some of this would be handled really at your level. Like if the Planning Commission determined, under that third there that, that it was reasonable to fill for, some greater public purpose that, that you felt was important, then that would really be approved here at this level. And then there'd be conditions that you could place onto it, that it, or follow in making your determination, which were those following ones. And then it would just be permitted at the staff level. Same as if someone was building a shopping center or some large development, and they found in the middle of it that they had a dropout in the middle of their parking lot that was already half under construction. Rather than have to go back through the process, they potentially could have that dealt with at the staff level. They would have to have it engineered, and they'd have to get TDECA permits, for what's called an injection well permit, and they'd have to do it in such a way that they stabilize the sinkhole and they did it right. But they would, be able to fill without going to the Board of Zoning Appeals or the Stormwater Advisory Board, whoever it happened to be, the appellate body. But there are still potential things out there that we haven't considered that could come up that still might need a variance. And regardless of what board it went to, would have to go on to a variance request. Or people that just don't agree with the decision, need to have some sort of appellate body to go to, to deal with that. So we were in part, or at least the way we conceived of this, is that we can handle some of these things during the review process and at the staff level. We did try to put language in there that anytime the town staff felt, that something exceeded or was, of such a magnitude that we felt that it needed to come back to the Planning Commission, we could refer it back to you. But again, we were just trying to build in some flexibility there to deal with things without having to, run them back to an appellate mechanism. But again, that's something for y'all to decide, is what you think is appropriate and what you want to recommend on to the town board. And eventually it'll have to be the town board that'll have to do this, by ordinance to make any changes.
And as a BZA, in a lot of times it would be better to go back first to put another layer in there with the stormwater, so there could be some determination. When you have a civil engineer on that particular committee, they're way smarter than the guys sitting here.
I would much prefer that the BZA make the final decision on that, but I agree with going through the stormwater committee.
Do we need to add some language
adding a
to
layer?
send certain scenarios through stormwater committee?
Yeah, I think we could keep it flexible and maybe be at the discretion of the staff to make a determination, or whomever, planning commission, based on the characteristics of the issue. Because I think if you try to word it such that it's specific to just drainage, that you might end up with something that you might need to, you still would want to get the Stormwater Advisory Committee's input on it, but it may not be only drainage related.
Okay, whose liability is if we allow all this and if somebody loses their life in a case of them? Is it going to be us because we made this decision?
Well, I think we've got some pretty detailed language in what we're proposing. Actually, in my opinion, much more detailed than what we have right now. I think it's more clear. So, I mean, you never know about sinkholes. You do the best you can to try to know where they're at and avoid them and don't mess with them. I know some of y'all may remember when we actually drafted this ordinance several years ago, we had Scotty Sorrells come and talk to you all about it. And he said the best thing to do with sinkholes is just leave them alone. And I'll never forget that, because that's just simple.
Well, why are we doing this?
Simple. Well, because there can be situations where that's not possible. Or there could be a compelling public interest that without some flexibility, and that you wouldn't be able to achieve it. But you still need to demonstrate, if you're going to do that you are going to be meeting a lot of requirements to protect us to the greatest extent possible. You can never protect yourself 100% from anything, but you can certainly, I think with this language, I think there's a lot of protection built in there, in my opinion.
And I would also note, for the concern about buildings, that, this really pertains principally to roadways, walking trails, driveways, parking areas, that sort of thing.
This one.
Yeah, because if you look on page 4, what was part 5 is now part, would be part 6 if you made these changes. It's about midpoint on the page. Building construction, would still be prohibited within 50 feet of a sinkhole lip elevation. And so we're not contemplating people filling and putting buildings on sinkholes. It's
Dollar General staying 50 feet away?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
I'm not sure walking trail is a justified reason for filling in a sinkhole.
Well, that's up to you all as the representatives of the town to make that determination.
We've got lots of walking trails around.
Yeah. Again, that's a collective decision by you all.
Made a good point. Where is the walking trail going? From Fox End entrance to what?
Well, it would connect that commercial property to the east. I mean, there is one more commercially zoned parcel between Foxton entrance and the Dollar General store. So it would, ideally, somebody could walk from the Dollar General to over whatever's going to be there someday for that walking trail.
Well, and eventually the commercial is supposed to develop all the way to Old Stage, and so there will be
going west too. I think we're talking about what Betty was saying was, why do we even need a walking trail there going to the east?
Yeah, to the east, there's a separate owner. To the west, the owner that sold, which would be Shad's, that sold the property to the Dollar General, they own the rest of the way
west. The rest of the way
west.
Yep.
On through the curve.
Well, I think you always have to think, as you all should, about the future, not about the next 5 years, but
Yeah.
what about 25 years from now? I think that connection would be valuable in some location. I don't know where, but in some location, getting those connections in as you develop properties, even if they don't make a bit of sense right now, they may 20 years from now. They make a lot of sense. Because look at North Shore Drive. I drive that every day. If out there they would have asked those developers to put in their sections as they did all those subdivisions, you'd have had a tremendous asset for the whole region down there.
And a lot less traffic on North Shore.
Yeah. So, that kind of forward thinking is what we need to consider on these. And this language would give us a little more opportunity to be, forward thinking on these other competing public interests that we need to think about for the
Count on
future.
it coming up with every one of all along this area. It's very same thing coming, so it looks like. Now, I don't want us to be doing this for Dollar General.
No.
Well, I don't think we are. I mean, quite frankly, the folks next door, they may not meet the 400 feet of separation for their driveway, and they may need that connection to the Dollar General entrance. And so, and that's a way for us to be able to isolate in safe areas where traffic is egressing and ingressing, and also it gives somebody the ability, instead of having to pull out on a Kingston Pike, drive down and pull back in. I mean, it meets our connectivity requirements. I think this gives staff the latitude in the event. I don't think this is going to come up very often, but when it does come up, I think it does give us some latitude to say, well, what's proportional to the public interest. I absolutely understand what Betty's saying about, let's stay away from sinkholes, and they're bad, and she's exactly right. But I think when there's minor disturbances that are justified by the public good, I think it's appropriate.
Yeah. And we've already, just in looking at a couple of, other areas in town, I mean, there will be the potential for other conflicts between sidewalks and walking trails, and where you can potentially connect them with existing sinkholes. Now, our preference would always be, if at all possible, to swing up and around a sinkhole, or somehow design around it. But again, and that'll always be our default position in terms of recommendations and trying to see good design work to as Mark was saying, avoid the sinkholes as whenever possible and just leave them alone. But if there are instances where you have to balance those competing public interests, we thought at least to build in some flexibility might be reasonable.
So do we have any changes to the language or any additions?
So you want us to give consideration to involving the Stormwater Advisory Committee in some capacity on this? Okay.
I think so.
We'll try to figure out. We may, I don't want to say something for Bart, but we'll try our best to get this in a ordinance format, if we can, for your consideration next time. I'm not promising that, but we got to look at a couple other things that we didn't really include in here, dealing with minimum floor elevation. I think that's coming up next week at the Board of Zoning Appeals, so maybe just cleaning that up a little bit as well. But yeah, I think what he's got in here is, in my opinion, really makes this ordinance a lot more clear and a lot more thorough, really.
One last thing, if you, right there where that is at, or like what we said earlier, it does have a drain, it goes underneath the road. If you put your walking trail across right there, that's a no-load item, really, compared to what it would take to and if you get back to where the connecting driveway would be, you're just really around the very edge of the lip. And of course, when I went out and looked at it, once they uncovered it, it still looks like somebody's put that drain in. I mean, that's what it looks like to me. It sure don't appear to be part of that sinkhole.
It looks like a ditch.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, because to go to all the trouble to put the drain in, without putting some sort of manhole style drain that went straight down, which they didn't do, but it looks like they did.
This was when
But it-
Kingston Pike was constructed
Yeah.
years ago.
Because if you look at the elevation and look at the topo and the change, you kind of can see that it's just the natural lay of the land. So that's it.
Sounds more like a swale with a drainage pipe.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, we need to take a break now for the,
Well, we just got one more item. I'll try to be brief if y'all. We still got 30 minutes on the tape,
Oh, okay.
apparently.
I'm sure my bladder has 30 minutes left.
Oh, well, if y'all need to take a break, we can. I'll try
I
to
could
be.
probably make it 15, but I don't know about 30.
Yeah, I don't think this will take too long on this one. I'll try to be to the point with it. We kind of talked about this a little bit when we were talking about our work program for our department for
do I need
20.
to read this out?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
Discussion on Planning Commission initiatives related to the comprehensive land use plan update for discussion purposes only.
Well, like I say, we've kind of introduced this when we talked about our work program in the community development department. One of those, concurrent work program items is just to work on updating our comprehensive land use plan. We've made a lot of amendments to our ordinances to, I think, move us in the direction of trying to implement a lot of the strategies like the connectivity. We've gotten a lot better with that, made ordinance requirements now on that, looking at more efficient use of our land, like with our parking modifications. The mixed-use town center change that we made a few years ago, I think, is steering us in a direction toward, the development of that. But I think in just looking at this, this is really the most important document of our community, at least in terms of land use. It's our vision document, and I think we really need to look at this in more depth and more comprehensively. There's a lot of things that I think need to be done, and we need to have, in my opinion, we need to get a smaller work group to look at the plan, identify different things that we need to focus on, prioritize those, engage the public on those recommendations, and then start implementing and getting things done. Maybe starting out with small things, building on the success of those, and then moving on to maybe more difficult things. We've talked about the mixed-use town center. Hopefully that development earlier tonight will be a small step in the direction of getting us moving in that toward the mixed-use town center. We've got some other projects that we're hoping will come on board as well pretty soon. Looking at our activity hubs that are in the plan, are there some opportunities for new hubs? We've talked about creating a mixed-use neighborhood zoning district. I think that, from my opinion, that's really needed in this community. There's even the light industrial zoning district that's talked about in the land use plan that we don't have, and we might want to think about that. We need to think about what is the future of our land use, because these big box retail establishments are a thing of the past, and if our revenue source is based largely on those, we've got to really be thinking about that with what we're doing here at the Planning Commission level with our land use and being efficient, seeing what other communities are doing to look to the future about how they use their land and try to introduce those to our community and see what we can do. I've always had this idea of these 20-minute neighborhoods, and that's something I'd like to bring up to try to get our community to different locations in the town where people can get to activity hubs in 20 minutes in various modes. either walking, on the bicycle, in the car, whatever. Something that, is community building, that I think would really enhance our, what we're trying to do and just take it to another level. So there's a lot of things in the plan that need to be kind of discussed and laid out and prioritized. So again, I think what we need to do, from my professional recommendation, is to get a small working group together. Of course, when they meet, we'll probably have, commissioners involved and maybe board of mayor and aldermen. So it'll be public meetings, but they'll be informal, and we can look at these things in more depth and not at 10 o'clock at a planning commission meeting. So, and then we can make an organized assessment of this and make some good recommendations that we can discuss with our community. So I don't know how you all feel about that, or if you wanted to appoint a couple of people to work with the staff to come up with a small group to work on this, or not. But that's just throwing it out there.
I think this is a good idea. If you look at our land use plan, it calls for us to review it every 5 years or so. And we approved it in December of 2012, so we're coming up on 5 years. I've looked at it, and even just from identifying one of the things that you and I have talked so much about is the 20-minute neighborhoods, identifying the activity hubs, and we have, we never identified the Renaissance Swan Farm area as an activity hub. We have some opportunity for possibly a pocket park in that flood area on the Biddle property off of Campbell Station. There's things that are missing that as we look at it, we need to kind of identify what we'd like to see going forward. And I think I would love it if we could get some planning commissioners involved, but also maybe some people that have indicated interest in the questions they're asking, particularly younger families. There's a woman in particular I'm thinking about. She's pretty young. She's started her Instagram page, Found in Farragut. Very passionate about getting Farragut looking active again, and I think she would be a great asset to something like this. So I'm on board. Sign me up.
Okay.
You on the committee then?
I think these 20-minute neighborhoods are good, except how many people go to the grocery store, walk to the grocery store and carry their groceries home? You do? You have one bag?
Well, how many people live in a place where they can do that?
Yeah, that's a good point.
You know,
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. I've never seen anybody walk down from Village Green. It may happen. But
I have a friend she sends her kids to Fresh Market to pick up dinner or chicken or whatever. So, and they go out on their bike. I envision it, the old Ingalls, I think, could develop into a mixed-use neighborhood. You certainly have the senior living community right by the new Ingalls. I could see that very easily happening. But it's not just grocery stores. It's I'm thinking a lot of us joke around about P's and Q's. And how, boy, if we had an access road through Swan Farm, then we could just ride our bikes over. I don't think they can. No, I'm not going to go down that road. But those are, that's
like we had a lot of discussion about that not happening.
That's a community gathering area. And there's things that happen on the lawn. And, of course, there's the Saturday morning farmers market. There's, other than Fox Run, there's no way for anyone over there to get to, on a bicycle. You want to get out with your family and take a ride over, and you can't really get there safely. But we need to identify that. That is an opportunity that we need to take advantage of. We need to realize that we have pockets all over our community that if we're kind of narrow in and dial in on, we've got some great potential here.
Mm-hmm. Great.
The hard part is getting from P's and Q's back home after
That's-
you've been at P's and Q's for a
That's-
couple hours.
That's very true. That's very, very
Yeah.
true.
Good point.
Bicycle more than-
Yeah, you may not want to be on your bike. You may just want to walk home.
Yeah, biking might not be a good idea.
Golf cart?
What do you want to do with that? You want to appoint a couple of people on the planning commission to work with the staff, or what do you want to do?
Does anybody else want to join it? It's good. It might be a committee of one.
I think we've got a chairwoman right there.
I can help. It sounds like fun.
That would
Okay.
be
Communities
wonderful.
and
Jack
pocket
would be
stuff
wonderful
is stuff
addition.
I'm really passionate about. Like really building communities and mixed use. That's my favorite part of this.
Very good.
Well, and he's the age that he's going to be around 25 years from now,
Yeah,
too.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely,
To
yeah.
take advantage of those
Well, I
things.
think that's a very important perspective
Yes.
in what we're trying to do, yeah.
And it's hard to get people
Yeah,
involved.
it is.
Yeah.
Yep, the
I think
time
it'd
is
be-
a problem.
You
Yep.
need people younger than I am.
Well, we need a variety of different people from all ages. I think that would be helpful.
Drew says he'll do it.
We'll,
That's three.
okay.
That's three.
We could get three, and then, I don't want a super huge group, but we could kind of get together and figure out who else we want to try to
Okay.
invite
You'd
into
be
our
great
group.
if you had time.
And go from there. All right.
We come up with a nickname for ourselves?
I'm going to leave that to you, Jack.
Some T-shirts.
T-shirts. Yeah, man,
T-shirts
we
and
could do
hats.
like
I'm going to wear it, but.
We'll wear it to all the meetings, have our own club.
Okay, the August 17, 2017 meeting of Farragut Planning Commission is adjourned. And I've got to
you.
beat Noah to the bathroom.
Are you all going to use the same one?
Oh, there's that little private bathroom back here. I'm going to go out to the lobby.